This game contains scenes of explicit violence and gore. God, doesn't that just bring all of you boomers back? Hello and welcome to this commentary for Dino Crisis 2, a game that I freaking loved and played so much as a kid, and for the most part it's held up relatively well. I'm going to be shutting up momentarily so you can enjoy the intro cutscene, which is just Predator level of gung-ho action. And during that cutscene, I want you to play a little game that anime fans play called Spot the Protagonist. You don't get any points for winning, you just lose points if you don't get it right. See you on the other side.
1 year has passed since the third energy incident. Dr. Kirk's research on third energy has been taken over by a government agency, and massive research has begun at a base somewhere in the Midwest. However, in their pursuit of immediate results, they have failed to take the necessary precautions, and once again, an accident has occurred. This time, the entire research base, military institution, and a small town close by have disappeared. In their place, there now lies a jungle from another time.
May 10th, 2010. I'm about to step through a gate into another time. Or maybe it's another world. I'm being sent in with other members of TRAD. Our mission? To rescue 1,300 survivors and collect data on the Third Energy Project.
Hey Sarge, where do you want this? Did you organize a transmission on this GPS? There's something wrong. Hey. Huh?
So, this is the Cretaceous way of welcoming guests, huh? Not exactly the red carpet treatment.
There's no response.
I'm pretty sure my team's alright. There's more than 1,000 survivors. Let's get moving. Now, hold on. What was your name again? Hey!
The ivy is wrapped around the door. It won't open. Let's try the door over there.
Oh, come on. Didn't they teach you how to open a door at SORT training? Here, I'll show you. Watch this.
Yeah, that weapon definitely suits a Trat member. But I prefer to go in this way. See ya, Mr. Barbarian.
Hey, the name's Dylan. Call me that when you need some help, okay?
So I remember, even though I hadn't really completed Dino Crisis 1, being a little bit disappointed. It's like, oh, we're taking control of this geezer? I want to play as Regina. What the hell's going on? Have they just bait and switched me? But we do get to play her a little bit later. There's 2 characters that you can be switching back and forth throughout the game. Dylan's a new character that we don't know much about, and Regina obviously being the hero of the first game. Unfortunately, Rick and Gale do not make a return except outside of like a little mini game you can unlock after beating the game, but they aren't actually in the main game. But at least that means they definitely don't die. So Dylan has like a machete, and Regina has, I guess, like a stun gun of some kind of description. And a lot of the time, to make sure you get your characters going where they need to, the game kind of like, I wouldn't say signposts, but definitely railroads you down certain tracks depending on that. So if you come across a door with like Ivy, obviously that's where Dylan's meant to be going. And then if you come across like an electronic lock, that's where Regina's meant to be going. And I'm sure straight away you noticed, what the fuck is going on? We've killed more dinosaurs already than like the first like hour of Dino Crisis 1. So I think there was, I don't know if there was much in the way of criticism of Dino Crisis 1. I know it seems to have, for the most part, been quite beloved. I don't think perhaps it sold as well as the Resident Evil games. It was very much banking on the success of Jurassic Park having come out. I say that, Jurassic Park 2 would have been coming out shortly before it got released, but obviously Dinosaurs very much in the public zeitgeist. And with Dino Crisis 1 being a game that emphasizes puzzles and more classical survival horror elements, Dino Crisis 2 completely flips that on its head and goes for a more action orientation, which is perhaps why I played it more as a kid. I just wasn't able to get through some of the puzzles. I mean, you try being like 5 or 6 years old. I was really young. I shouldn't have been playing those games. But, you know, my granddad had a PlayStation and we have those games there, so what else are you going to do? But, yeah, I played this one a lot. The puzzles, if you want to call it that, are very simple. Like, I think the only bit I occasionally got stuck on is that you have to find a certain keycard at one point in a certain location, and sometimes I wasn't too certain where to go. But for the most part, it's just a run and gun game, which I know some people have some issues with because it still maintains the Capcom tradition of having these fixed camera angles. And I know some people are just like, it's not really well suited to an action game, but that might just be because they're more used to modern sensibilities. I know the Dino Crisis, I know the Devil May Cry games originally started with the fixed camera angles, and then as the series progressed, became more of just a third-person action game. This hasn't quite got to that point. You still have to deal with tank controls, which for the most part work okay. And I always wondered, having played Dino Crisis 2 and then going back to other games, why the fuck you can move and shoot in this game and yet you cannot in any other games that Capcom released around the same time. I mean, I know the obvious answer is that zombies aren't really much of a threat if you can move and shoot at the same time. Even in the remakes that they made, you would have to make the zombies either move suddenly very erratically, or they would make the ammo conservation quite difficult by making their head bob up and down like they're a boxer weaving, which obviously you can't do in this format. So I guess that was the reason why. But it always struck me as weird that you have these STARS members who are meant to be elite operatives, super cops as they say, and yet they can't fire whilst on the move. That seems like a really basic thing they should learn. But in terms of an action game, it works very well. So we're just going to use up all of our ammo here because we know this next place is safe, and we want to try and get as many points as we can because points mean prizes.
Hey! Who are you? Are you one of the survivors? run away! Come out! We came here to rescue you!
Velociraptor, meaning swift Caesar. Length 4.8 meters, height 1.8 meters. Observation records. We originally thought of dinosaurs were just slow and dumb reptiles. We soon realized this wasn't true at all. The Velociraptor proved us all wrong. The claws on each foot is sharp as a blade, providing for a powerful slash, making them a killing machine. The long hard tail is used as a balance when running at high speeds. However, it is also used as a weapon. The tail whip is so powerful that it can shatter bones. Combat notes. When and if you encounter them, never show your back to them. The moment you start running away, you become prey to them. No soldier has come back alive running away from them. The basic rule in this world is to fight. The raptors are the most prosperous carnivorous dinosaur in this world. There live different flocks in various areas. Their behavior and endurance are not all similar, but they all have one thing in common. Speed. They are fast. It is best not to use heavy weapons. Also, on very rare occasions, there have been encounters of blue raptors reported. Their attack and toughness are said to be Ultra-raptor level. Go hunt them down if you dare to claim yourself as a real hunter. So yeah, obviously we know most of that's bullshit. I think most people at this point know Velociraptors were about turkey sized, but that's something I talked about quite a lot in Dino Crisis 1, and I'm not going to rail too much on the inaccuracies this time round, mostly because I feel Dino Crisis 2 kind of earns itself a little bit of an out. Like, if ever you come across something that's trying to take itself seriously and then it fucks up, then you kind of like, I feel almost morally obligated to have to be like, nah, that's wrong, fam. But if a game like this, like, it's obvious it's just, you know, some goofy fun. I mean, Dylan in general is a bit of a goofball. Very good-natured kind of typical protagonist who, heart of gold, not always the brightest, but, you know, always wants to do the best. And as a result, I give it a bit of a pass. It's just run and gun, shoot raptors, don't think about it kind of game. So what we have done, and you might have noticed, when you gain these points, they can be used to purchase a number of different things. We could have purchased a gun called a solid cannon, which I haven't bothered getting just yet because it's not too useful. It's very strong, but it's very short ranged, and as such, I'm not a big fan of using them against these raptors, just because it gives them too much an opportunity to get close. The shotgun that you start with is very good for taking out these raptors. As you can see, when you shoot them, you stun lock them. If they're very close, you can even knock them on their back. And because, as I recall from a comedy bit done by Bill Burr, it's got a good spread. It's got a very good spread. You can hit multiple raptors at the same time. So even if you have like 2 or 3 charging at you from one area, you can just walk backwards, gun them, and it's no problem whatsoever. The biggest threat you're ever going to come across is when you get surrounded a bit. So despite what that file said about never showing your back to raptors, it's actually often a good idea to try and run past them. And I think you can kind of see me doing this here. You run past them if something's chasing you to take it out before turning around, so you can just focus on shooting one at the same time. So the T-Rex in this game kind of takes on the same role that Nemesis did in number 3 of Resident Evil, in which it will just stalk you throughout the game. And every time you come across it, you can't fight it. Like, you won't be able to take it out. And I do like that it's a bit of a change of pace. So much of this game is running, gunning, and just mowing down hordes of reptiles. But you come across the T-Rex and you just have to run from it. So it changes, it mixes things up a little bit, changes the pace. And you notice that he only has one eye because it's the same T-Rex that got shot with the rocket launcher in the intro cutscene. So in addition to a plethora of dinosaurs, we have the futuristic lesbian biker gang to contend with, who are going to crop up every now and then. And there's a story reason for them, but they do seem very out of place at this point. I mean, obviously, I say it's futuristic technology. This is 2010, allegedly. That's gone back in time. I must admit, though, moving forward, although it probably would have made more sense for this game to have the 3D backgrounds, unlike the first one, I'm so glad they didn't. There's just so much detail and depth and just story just in the environments, and I think it's one of the reasons that this game does hold up, because of those backgrounds. Doctor's Papers. Time shift. Again, the day has come. January 14th. This is the day when the third energy accident occurred, and we were sent to this time. This is the 10th time this day has come, and every time I feel the same. Despair. The medical supplies from the medical room has all been used up in the very first year. Since then, we've been collecting wild plants to make medicines without knowing its effect. Nevertheless, they have been used to heal the wounds of the soldiers, and all we could do was to wait for the rescue. Why haven't they come to rescue us? I thought about this question for the past 10 years, and I have come to a conclusion. The time shift or fold is caused by the overdrive of the third energy, but our current level of technology wasn't advanced enough to recover the accident. Years of technological research wouldn't be enough. A time error of 10 or 20 years is insignificant to a time slip of 65 million years. But that error, that time difference, could mean everything for us. We should have never laid our hands on a toy so dangerous. Now there's 2 files coming up, so I'm going to start reading those now so it doesn't cut into the cutscenes coming up. Tyrannosaurus Rex, meaning Tyrant Lizard King. Length 14.5 meters, height 4.8 meters. Observation record. As the name states it well, they are the largest land carnivores of this Cretaceous world. They act upon their hunter instinct and are always on the hunt for prey in order to sustain energy for their gigantic body. What is so special about them is their implacability. Once they set their eyes on its prey, they have a habit of pursuing it. A soldier once reported that he saw one swimming trying to follow its prey, not to mention their savageness. After making a toy of their prey, they will finish it with a lethal bite. Combat notes. No reports have come in with regards to killing a T-Rex. Every military soldier who tried to kill it have died. There are hardly any combat data. If we were forced to give an indirect conclusion, we would say that the T-Rex has no real weakness. Rumour has it that there was one person who escaped from the implacable T-Rex chase. She was not a soldier, but simply an intelligence personnel. Supposedly good looking, about 20 years old. Storage room items. All instruments and materials will be transferred to the research facility tomorrow. Starting next month, an extensive experiment will start relating to the time gate. There just aren't enough computers to save all the data. We need as many computers as we can gather. The time gate's revival project has hit against a wall. We hope the experiment will bring about effective measures. Give all research facility keys to Lieutenant Wolf of the transport team today. The keycards are kept in a box in the wall of this room. Approximately 250 people of the soldiers' families have been moved to the living quarters of Edward City last month. Now it's all up to us to revive the time gate. So yeah, a couple of times this game commits the cardinal sin of requiring you to be in the right spot, going into your inventory, and then using the car key rather than just using it automatically when you're in the right area. So just be aware of that. It has path blocked me in the past.
You have inserted an incorrect key. Trespasser confirmed. This room will be locked.
Somebody answer me. David. Regina. Over.
This is Regina. Over.
Regina, I'm trapped. I'm at the military facility. I need your help. Over.
Did you swing your precious machete around? Well, I guess I can help you out. Over.
Good, okay. I'll put a key in front of the door as a mark. Don't let me down. Over and out.
You know, I don't mean to be mean, but I can't help but think that it speaks somewhat to Dylan's intelligence, and you know, it might not have worked at all, but it always bugged me that he never even tried just putting the keycard back and seeing if that let him out. It probably wouldn't have worked, but to just throw the keycard out under the door, you'd want to try some other stuff first. But regardless, we are taking over as Regina. Thankfully, it doesn't take us too long to swap over to our main and best gal, who has a few different weapons and a different tools up her sleeve. Allosaurus, meaning odd lizard. Length 8.5 meters, height 3 meters. Observation record. Anyone who encounters this dinosaur will first feel threatened. Although they're over 8 meters in height, they can easily jump over obstructions which are 2 meters high. They will not let a prey escape from them. Their prey is not limited to herbivores. They also feed on small carnivores. You should look out for the Allosaurus in areas where raptors are present. There have been sightings of the Allosaurus hunting in groups. We figure there are quite a number of them. Combat notes. They always position themselves to face their enemy. This is probably because they have a real hard armor on their head. Shooting their head will not really hurt them. A smart way of killing it is to go around to their side and shooting them in the side of their stomach. However, their quick feet make it difficult to move to their side. If this technique is difficult, you'll have to rely on a weapon with firepower. So unlike zombies or lesser demons, the basic unit that you're going to come across, the basic enemy, is the raptor. I'm imagining it must be some kind of like Ultra-raptor, if we're trying to be specific. Obviously, the game will call it Velociraptor, but as I think most people know, Velociraptors were about the size of a turkey. They did actually exist raptors roughly the size, maybe even a little bit larger than the kind of raptors we see in pop culture, but it's going to call it Velociraptor. But this raptor, whatever kind it is, whether you go by the game and say it's Velociraptor, even though that's going to mess with my ADHD to obscene levels, they are far more threatening than slow-moving zombies or easily dispatched demons. The standard pistol that you have is incredibly ineffective at dealing with them. There's a couple of times, as you might have noticed as we walk through there, that you have like these lasers that will create a kind of barrier, and if a raptor is stuck behind one of those, then okay, yeah, it's fine to plug away at them with the ammunition you have from a pistol. You try doing that when it can run at you and you won't last long, so avoid doing that. So this is the Allosaurus, the dinosaur we were reading about quite recently. One of the coolest designs and enemies of this game, just how nimble they are, despite the fact that they're, you know, pretty big carnivores. Although we're going to leave them for now, just because we do not have much ammunition. We'd probably have to end up finishing off the stun gun. It's too much of a risk to really be worth it. And also then clearing out this next section with as few rounds as we have already is not going to be easy, so we just don't want to give ourselves the extra challenge. A good thing to note is whenever you're moving up and down a ladder or interacting with the environment, you contain iframes. You can't be hurt while you're moving up and down. In a similar way, I've been watching quite a few people do speedruns for Resident Evil 4 with the HD remake or remaster, as it were, coming out soon. And a lot of the times they'll like throw a grenade, or an enemy will throw some dynamite, and then they'll vault over a small ledge. And whilst they're in that vaulting animation, they can't take damage. So Again, I guess this is kind of like the proto-action game that RE4 would become. Try to use that to your advantage as and when you can. Incineration of plants. From recent reports, it appears that in parts of the jungle near the facility, there has been a sudden outbreak of poisonous plants called PP34. From the body, approximately 30 centimeters in diameter. They continue to spout poisonous spores. One of our members who inhaled the spores is in an unconscious critical state. For those of you who are in the medicine plant sample collecting team, temporarily stop the sample collecting and set up a team to rid the poisonous plants. Use flame launchers for this emergency operation. When doing so, remember to keep your distance from the... So one of the reasons why I've been trying to kill most of the enemies I come across is just for the extra points. You can hit a roadblock, especially here where you need the flamethrower to progress, and if you haven't managed to pick up enough points because you've been spending them on ammunition or ammo upgrades, you're going to hit a bit of a roadblock. I mean, it's simple enough to deal with. The enemies will constantly respawn, so just go out there and start dino hunting for a bit, but I did my best to make this walkthrough as seamless as possible, so there shouldn't be any instances of that.
Grab my hand. Who are... Listen, young lady, I don't want to do this to you, but you've left me no other choice.
So with the lesbian biker all tied up, kinky, we ladies, we are ready to go forth to the poisonous plants, and we have a few new tools to help us in, which I have completely neglected to pick up. So, as well as the flamethrower, we also have this firewall. Now, most of the sub-weapons you come across are actually compatible with both Regina and Dylan. The flamethrower is actually one of the few weapons that both of them can use, so which is quite useful because I find it's very good for dealing with the Allosaurus. And the firewall, again, both of them can use. I find it's a lot more important on Regina, especially in this early stage, just because you don't have the stopping power with your handgun. So a good thing to do is if you put yourself into a corner, which usually in many situations is not a good thing to do, but I remember from my kickboxing instructor where you never want to corner yourself unless you're outnumbered, in which case if you do put yourself into a corner, they can only come at you one at a time. And the principle is the same here. If you get yourself into a corner and put the firewall down, the raptors can only come one way and you are completely protected. So the flamethrower, make sure you don't use all of the ammunition. We do need it to clear through the poisonous plants, but I really like using this to take out the Allosaurus. So if you remember when it was talking about the dino breakdown of the Allosaurus, it was saying how their head was heavily armored but their sides were quite vulnerable. The benefit of the flamethrower is that it's quite indiscriminate. It throws flame. And what you can do is if you keep firing the flamethrower at the Allosaurus like this, some of the, I guess, the traces, however the game determines where the hit is, actually goes to the side and hits up on the side. And as you can see here, you just completely stun lock it to death. So it is possible for the Allosaurus to hit you if you're just shooting the flame at it. So one thing I would recommend if you are struggling is if you actually try and wiggle the flame slightly left to right. That way it increases the possibility of the flame actually hitting the side of the Allosaurus, and that's what causes it to do that kind of like stun lock animation. So you notice whenever it takes damage and it does the I'm going to say pain animation. I'm going to mix together a few different words, but that pain animation, it'll always move either to the left or to the right, and the idea being is that it's moving away from whenever the source of damage is coming from. So it just so happens that the flamethrower is very effective for doing that, and you don't actually need to move to the side of it to hit its weak spot. There's a couple of other weapons which do a similar job. Later on with Dylan, we'll be using the solid cannon, which works in a similar way of basically hitting the side to stun lock it in place. But it's just a much easier way of dealing with them. Trying to take it out with the pistol at this point is doable. Is very doable. It will take a long time, and I would not recommend it. This area is full of poisonous spores emitted by the poisonous plants. If inhaled, they could be life-threatening. So this is an area which is a good place to pick up a healthy dose of points if you're quick. So although we've used like 200 units of flame, or I should say units of flame, 200 units of fuel, you only need to literally just tap the button once and just use one to take these plants out. So literally you only need like maybe 20 or 30 units of fuel left to clear this area. And if you move quick enough, because you don't have to worry about any dinosaurs, you can rack up a pretty big combo and get a healthy chunk of points. The only annoying part about this is, even though you can take damage here, you will not get any bonus for clearing the room without taking damage. And I'm guessing whoever was designing the game thought, yeah, no, that's way too easy. We don't give them even more points. But yeah, 5,600 points just for clearing the area. So if you go fast, obviously not too fast that you take damage. I mean, there's no damage multiplier, but again, you don't want to be taking hits if you can help it. Yeah, you can get some extra points. So it's just one of those ways this game really rewards you for being able to hit that combo up. In fact, later on will be an opportunity to show off. There's actually something that happens when you hit at least a combo of 20. There's a special event, shall we say, that occurs, which I straight up didn't know existed when I was... Actually, no, that is a lie. I had come across what happens, but I didn't know what triggered it. And they would always come up at a particular area. And I'm speaking in riddles at this point now, aren't I? I'll talk about it a little bit later when we get to it. But yeah, we have a new weapon now. We have the dual submachine guns, which are going to be very useful for the bit immediately ahead. And you'll find that happens quite a lot in this game. It doesn't... The game's relatively short, and I honestly think it could have done with a little bit more padding. A lot of the survival horror games do benefit from being relatively short because, you have to throw in the puzzles, and the first time clearing, say for instance like Resident Evil 1 through 3, it will take you a good few hours because you don't know what you're doing, you'll get lost, you'll backtrack, etc. And a lot of that is the atmosphere. Like, I think the first time I ever cleared a Resident Evil game, the clear time was like 8 hours or something. And then obviously when I've gone through my walkthroughs, I never even hit... And unless you include the intro and everything, I won't even hit 3 hours. That's a cutscene I straight up forgot even existed because it serves no purpose. It's just to remind you that those bike people are indeed still around, even though we literally just got done chaining up one of their comrades. But yeah, no, I think it could have done with just a little bit more, just so you could experiment with the different weapons and stuff. I mean, when they... Quite famously, Devil May Cry actually started off as a Resident Evil game, which just went so out there. They're like, let's turn this into something completely different. And Devil May Cry, the first one, is a lot longer than any of the Resident Evil games or any of these types of ones. So, because you're going for more of an action route, more of an arcadey route, I think it could have done with a little bit more length. Just, you know, just a couple little inches so you can experiment with the different weapons. But one thing because yeah, a lot of the weapons you come across, you only really get to use them for like a very small section and then that's done. Move on to the next weapon, the next section. But the submachine guns here are quite useful for, as you can see, with these guys, because they can pick 2 different targets independently. When you're dealing with these pterodactyls, they help a lot. So what I try to do is actually keep walking backwards. That way I can keep up a constant stream of fire. And then fire in small bursts, because it's very easy for Regina to lose track. Like every time you see her where one of her guns just moves down horizontally, that means she's not aiming at anyone. You're just wasting ammo. So I try to fire in these quite small bursts, except, well, there I just went full auto because I wasn't managing to hit the pterodactyl quite right, and I could hear that it was making the noise to do the swooping attack, so I'm trying to take it out. And I was trying to, you know, trying to kill a few more there, but I was like, fuck it, let's just move on. It's much easier to get the no damage bonus fighting tougher enemies. It's a lot more generous with it. But yeah, we're going to pick up the key that Dylan decided to just slide under because, you know, fuck trying to get yourself out. There's a woman. Get the woman to do it instead. And make our way through to the military facility where we can test out our submachine guns on raptors. Which I don't use that often. I usually do end up using the handgun even later on. But as you can see, it's very useful if you can kind of like back yourself into a corner. You have to kind of position it so that Regina is facing in the middle of 2 different raptors to be able to aim at both of them at the same time. Otherwise, one will either fall in the middle or both will aim at the same enemy. There's a little bit of finesse to it, but you'll get the hang of it. And also we have to actually change back to our handgun to be able to actually use our stun stick. It's a bit silly, but there's a lot of weapons, I guess for balancing reasons, because you're meant to be holding 2 weapons. You can't have the sub-weapon at the same time. And it just makes sure when you're switching weapons back and forth, you don't forget that, because if you go straight back to the handgun, it'll automatically put the stun baton in. And you don't want to be in a situation where you're about to get jumped by a raptor. You press the button because you're expecting a fireball to go down, and instead it just anemically swing a baton and then get your face mauled off. Management of key plates. This is a notification that now all facility keys will be managed in the control room. The colours of the lock terminal corresponds to the colour of the key. Matching the colours of the keys and the terminals will release the security lock. Due to security reasons, only one key can be removed at any time. Also, the key's electronic information is reprogrammed each week. For this reason, always return the key to the key control system after use. So that's what Barbarian Dylan did wrong. He didn't have a stun gun to get to that extra room. Yeah, this is a really good way to use the fireball. If you can just hug a corner, you're basically impervious to damage. It won't work in all situations. For instance, pterodactyls tend to kind of just attack from odd angles so they won't fly into it, as well as the T-Rex, as you can imagine. Despite the fact that all animals are scared of fire, T-Rex in this game at least is too much of a Giga Chad to give a fuck about a few flames. I mean, he can survive like rockets to the face. So he's, you know, he really should have been nerfed last patch, but the game devs got confused and just buffed him instead. You know, standard stuff if you've ever played a MOBA.
Hey, what took you so long?
Nice to see you, too. You owe me one. I found a young female survivor. But she was uncooperative. I locked her up in the control shack. I'll take her back to the ship. You go on ahead. I'll meet you there. Just try to relax. What is wrong with you? You're a survivor, right? Please, we're here to help. What's your name? Where are all the others? Where's your family?
Regina, you better come and see this.
Who trashed the place?
It wasn't dinosaurs. Someone must have got in here and destroyed all the computers.
The activator for the gate is broken too. We can't get back to our own time.
It must have been those people with the helmets.
They also damaged the engine activator. We can't even move our ship.
Okay. We'll have to look for something in this world in order to get us back to our original time. And we have to find parts for the ship, too.
Hey! Before you go, handcuff the girl so she won't run away. There's a facility we haven't gone to yet. You gotta check it out.
Right. Calm down. I'm here to help you. Just calm down. Look, I have to make sure you don't escape. Trust me. Hey. What are you doing? Stop it. What's the matter?
I think our mystery girl here needs to be hit with the horny stick. Just give her a good old bonk over the head. I do like how the game doesn't even try to explain how on earth Regina got her all the way across the jungle, considering she was fidgeting and struggling just in the room. Maybe we can assume that Dylan protected them along the way. We just don't get to see that part because, let's face it, escort missions are kind of difficult. And I also love how they just left her in the room. Wasn't even handcuffed. Just, oh yeah, by the way, before you leave, make sure you handcuff her. She could literally have already just run out already, so we should really get on and do that. But yeah, we've taken back over as Dylan, our main protagonist, who I still a little bit salty about because I just find Regina to be a far more interesting character. And at present, we don't have enough points to be able to purchase the solid cannon, which is a shame, so we're instead going to have to whack out our flamethrower because there's a couple of big boys waiting for us as soon as we leave. And I suppose this is one of the reasons why the flamethrower is available to both characters, because it would be quite difficult, and with the solid cannon being so expensive, it's good to have the flamethrower. Also, there's a well, I suppose it's like a key item, so I suppose you could make the argument there. But yeah, we're back on the boat, and now we're making our way to the facility. So near where we originally captured Paula, there is another facility just over to the side of it, and that's where we're heading to. And as you make our way out, and it's also quite nice that it kind of signposts you, like, okay, we can't take that route because that has the electronic lock. That's something that Regina can go through. So you are very much railroaded quite often. There isn't a huge amount of exploration you have to deal with, which is both a blessing and a curse. As a kid, it meant I could actually finish the damn thing, but does limit your ability to just run around and try your own thing. But yeah, exactly the same as you did before. Just keep the flame on him. Whenever he's stun locked, you can take the fire off to try and conserve a little bit of fuel. Just make sure you're hitting him when he isn't stun locked to just so it doesn't take a big old chunk out of you. You also have to be a little bit careful. If you keep doing this consistently, he shouldn't have an opportunity to harm you. But the Allosaurus Nest can enter an enraged state, which is what it mentioned on the dinosaur bestiary at the start. And when they do that, they are incredibly hard to actually get into the pain animation, and I would highly recommend, if ever you do mess up or if that becomes something that happens with them, that you just bug out, you get a safe distance away until it ends. It only lasts for a short period of time. It's like this kind of like berserker rage mode, and it's just too dangerous to be close to them when that's going on. But we're gonna, because we've used up most of our flame arrow, we're gonna have to mix in some shotgun shots to take this one out. Doesn't do a huge amount of damage, especially because we're hitting the head, but it's good to try and keep your distance. I would not recommend doing this same trick with the shotgun. You're liable to get yourself bitten in half. And although you're a little bit more durable in this game than the first one, with it being an action game, and that's the rage state, and then we get the fuck out. As well as being much harder to hit with the pain state, they're also faster and a lot more aggressive with their movement. As you can see, I tried to flame him, and I was fortunate enough that it was kind of just ending when I hit him, so that he wasn't able to, you know, take a bite out of me. But yeah, even with you having a bit more health than in Dino Crisis 1, these things will still kill you in 2 hits, on this difficulty at least, so you know, be cautious of that. Now, we could always just run past this, and you may have noticed quite a few times I'm going up and down ladders to basically avoid damage. If you've ever seen people play like the Resident Evil 4 speedruns, a lot of the time they will use, and there he goes. A lot of the times they'll be using the fact that whenever you're jumping over a fence or whatnot, you are invulnerable. And especially with these Allosauruses, they're very dangerous if there isn't anything to climb up and down. But off the top of my head, I don't think, apart from one specific instance where you have a different weapon, I don't think there's any times you come across them when there isn't ladders going up and down. So you can make use of that to try and avoid damage. And what we've just picked up here, so when you go through here, near where the waterfall is coming down, make sure you hit the action button along the side of the wall to collect that key card. So you're not meant to know that this is here just yet. You come across it a little bit later. It's meant to be, oh, we need the key card to get into this facility, and then there's a little memo you read which says that the key card got lost and that it got flushed down the river, and you then get a picture of roughly where it's meant to be, and from that you're meant to be able to infer, okay, I need to come back to this section and find it. But we're just trying to save a little bit of time, because interestingly enough, the key to getting an S rank on this game is actually really dumb. You need to be able to complete the entire game in under 2 hours, and that gets you the S rank, which never made any sense to me. So all the other games like Dino Crisis 1, all the Resident Evil games, when you get a ranking system, it's usually based on at least 3 criteria. So how many times you save, with some of them being really harsh, expecting you not to save at all, but usually they give you, you know, a few ink ribbons you can use. The amount of enemies you defeat, and also how much healing you do, which again is dependent on the game. Some have it so that if you use any first aid sprays, you can't get a top ranking, whereas other ones are more harsh and say, right, just X amount of healing in total. So that includes herbs and first aid spray. For some strange reason with this one, the only criteria for getting an S rank is to hit it in under 2 hours. It's just a time. I should have said that actually. Usually it's a time thing as well. So with like the first Resident Evil, I'm fairly certain it was 3 hours you've got to do it under. And then with the other ones, it's like 3 hours, 2 hours, 2.5 hours, etc. And big old one eye in the background, scaring off the raptors and not causing any trouble. How nice of them. But yeah, for this one, it was just speedrunning it, which never made any sense to me. And I didn't want to do a speedrun of this game because you wouldn't be able to show off all the different weapons and stuff. I mean, it's already quite short as it is. And the only way you can get that S ranking is if you're doing what I'm not doing here, which is instead of trying to hit a very large combo, you kind of just run through everything, which just seems really strange to me. It seems very counter to the point of the game. Like an actiony game like this, you know, a big draw of it is that you're trying to hit those big combos. You're trying to see how many points you can get. You get the very primal like dopamine influx of big number, go up, and yet to get the best rating, you need to not do that. It's strange. So I don't get the best rating in this walkthrough. And I said one day I might play through this again to do that. But in all honesty, I'm not I'm not the biggest fan of it. I'm not a speedrunner. I'm not nearly good enough to do it. I mean, I've watched quite a lot of speedruns. If any of you have watched, there's a really good channel called Summoning Salt, who like breaks down the history of different speedruns of games. So who got the fastest time initially, then how they improved upon it. Was it just that they had to get really good in timing it, or did they find a new exploit which shaved off a few minutes? Really interesting stuff. But people who speedrun are a specific breed of psychopath, which I just happen not to be. The fact that they will play just one game over and over, sometimes like 12 hours a day for like months, to shave off 1/4 of a second, that doesn't sound particularly appealing to me. I'm very much more of a, I guess, a role player. I like to break games here and there, but also I'm not like a Legend of Total War for any of you who are into Total War games or into Warhammer, who is all about minimaxing and what is the most efficient army. And I get that, and sometimes when I've been doing my legendary campaigns, you do have to kind of play like that. But I much prefer, I wouldn't say like roleplay, so to say, and not like deliberately limiting yourself, but I play games for fun. You know, a novel concept in this day and age, but games are something that I enjoy. I love going through them. The whole reason I started this channel was really just to have an excuse to play through older titles and not feel like I was wasting time, because, you know, as you get older, you don't have as much time to do stuff. I mean, I have a lot of other stuff I do outside of YouTube. YouTube's just like my hobby on the side. And I don't think even if I was successful, I'd like want to go full time, because it's just too volatile. And I have a lot of other interests as well. Now, gaming is one aspect, but the way I like to see it is the way the Eldar do it in Warhammer, which is you don't want to commit entirely to one aspect, because then you are just completely lost to that aspect. There's so much in life to enjoy. There's so many different games, and it's why I always get a little bit miffed with myself every time I get back into League of Legends, because I get addicted to hitting the rank ladder, seeing if I can hit diamond, seeing how far I can go, and I forget that games are meant to be enjoyable and fun, and I just end up becoming miserable playing it over and over again, forgetting that other games exist, and just generally feeling like a heroin addict. Just what am I doing? I'm miserable and yet I can't stop. And the fact that I tend to play champions that are always out of the meta and refuse to learn how to play the quote-unquote good ones that are actually strong at the moment probably doesn't do me any favors. You know, it's like when you're playing a multiplayer game, perhaps don't do that on hard mode, because it's just going to be a miserable experience when you come across someone who is far less skilled than you, but he's beating you because you decide to play something retarded. It's not a great time. But I was mentioning earlier that there's something specific that happens when you hit a 20 combo, which is kind of alluded to when you pick up the Raptor file. So what happens, if you'll recall from Dino Crisis 1, for those of you who have watched it, if not, go watch it, hint hint, wink wink, nudge nudge, there's a special subbreed of raptors called blue raptors, which are basically just souped up normal raptors. They have a lot more health, they hurt a lot more, they're a lot harder to hit with the pain stun. And I wanted to show off what these guys are like. So this is the first time I managed to hit a 20 hit combo, which again, if you were going to speedrun it and go for the S rank, you'd probably never even see, you know, part of the game. But yeah, if you see, I'm kind of moving back and forth. So a lot of the time when the raptors will spawn, it's when you move off camera. I mean, you may have noticed that already, just because of the nature of the game. They either fly in from off screen or they kind of just appear. So if you want to try and generate more enemies to get a higher multiplier and more points, if you kind of just sit on the edge between where two screens will change and just keep moving back and forth, you can usually get more of them to spawn. It's not always reliable, and there does usually seem to be a limit when you've killed a certain amount that they will stop spawning. But as you can see here, I've just hit number 20, and yeah, and that stops the combo. So 20 is all you need to hit, don't need to go any higher. And by hitting that combo, what it means is the next time you enter an area where you would normally be attacked by raptors, you're instead attacked by these blue raptors. And I quite specifically didn't want to do it until I picked up the solid cannon, because these guys are really tough and the shotgun just doesn't do much against them. But we get to show off our solid cannon, which is kind of strange. It kind of just like fires a ball of energy directly in front of you, which, like the flamethrower, is very good for like hitting behind the tough like head area of it. So it's very good for dealing with the Allosauruses. And as you can see there, because when you when you shoot the ball of electricity, it will stay in the air for a few seconds, continuing to damage. It's very, very good for stun locking enemies. And it is by far the most effective way of taking those guys out. You don't get a bonus for killing those without taking damage, unfortunately, but you get a hefty 7,000 points for taking them out anyway, so it's a huge chunk of points, and it's a lot more than you would normally be able to get, like a lot easier to deal with than racking up a big combo. And we're just going to serpentine our way through the pterodactyls here. The shotgun's not very good for dealing with them. I quite like the submachine gun, and we do get some weapons later on. But for Dylan, whenever I come across the pterodactyls, I honestly just run past them. We're not very effective at not getting our arse chewed off by them. So, you know, I try to kill most of the enemies I come across, but occasionally... what was the term? Discretion is the better part of valor, and sometimes you just want to bug out. And, you know, that's what they kind of showed us when we were fighting the T-Rex. Sometimes it's way better just to run. It's kind of ironic, actually, saying that you should, in the Dino file, saying you should never turn your back to raptors, never run from them. Actually, yes, you should in quite a lot of cases, even if it's just to, like, hit a corner so that you can aim your shot up to hit more of them more effectively. They don't move that fast. And in fact, there'll be a, I'll try to make sure I remember to put it in. There'll be a link to the Dino Coliseum, which is like a mini game you unlock after you complete this one, where you get to play through as different characters, and you have to like take out a string of different enemies, and you get the opportunity to actually play through as the raptors. And despite them being one of my favorite dinosaurs and just conceptually really cool, they are awful to play in Dino Crisis. They are so slow and clunky, and when you go to do like the leap attack, the raptors will kind of like pull back first before they jump in, and it just gives you such a huge window of which to have been hit back with them. So contrary to popular belief, the raptors in this game are probably outside of like say literally the T-Rex, they're probably the slowest and sluggish enemies you're going to come across. So yeah, sometimes run past them. So these little guys are Oviraptors, which, unlike the normal raptors in this game, are significantly closer to the actual size they would have been in nature. In fact, I would say, I should point out, that these creatures are relatively faithful adaptation. I mean, they should have a few more wings, but, you know, for the time, pretty good. Except for the fact that they spit acid at you. And it seems that Capcom took some creative liberties. They seem to be somewhere... They're kind of like a hybrid between the Oviraptor that they're based off of and then the Dilophosaurus from Jurassic Park, which, you know, famously spat venom. Or rather, I should say, historically and paleontology famously did not spit venom, but they did in the movie, because, you know, the book kind of touches on the fact that they're spliced with like frog DNA and all this other stuff, so you could make an argument for why they're able to do that. From as far as we know, there has never been any dinosaur that was capable of spitting venom. And obviously, you know, we're dealing with fossils thousands of years old, we don't know everything, but most animals that do spit venom, like snakes and whatnot, will actually have hollow teeth and they create pressure in those fangs to shoot out the venom. And so because we haven't come across any evidence of hollow teeth, we can say with relative certainty that there were in fact no dinosaurs that did spit venom. Researchers' records. The recovery of the time gate seems impossible with the limited instrumentations we have in this world. Today was supposed to have been the last hopeful experiment. However, the lack of instruments have stopped us from conducting this experiment. 1 week ago, the transport team led by Lieutenant Wolf was supposed to bring us the instruments for the experiment. They never arrived. Something must have happened in the military facility. We still haven't been able to establish communication with them. If we still intend to pursue with the experiment, we need to go to the missile silo on the other side of the suspension bridge. But the bridge was destroyed in a recent combat. The only other way to the other side is through the deadly poison zone. Unfortunately, it is too dangerous to even go near the area. Compsognathus, meaning pretty jaws. Length 1.2 meters, height 0.5 meters. Commonly known as Compy, the diet consists of mainly insects. They are tiny dinosaurs. They are typically no threat to humans. They move in packs and their social life revolves around their pack. It's when they started nesting in our research facility is when they became a nuisance. Their eyes appear to be similar to that of birds. We speculate that when they detect small shiny metallic things, it is their behaviour to take it back to their nest. This behaviour has frequently caused problems inside our facility. Combat notes. No real note has been taken since they do not directly inflict harm to humans. However, we are thinking of ways to stop them from stealing small belongings from the soldiers. Researcher's Notebook. March 25th. Lately, many of our guys have reported missing belonging, especially smaller items such as hand mirrors and watches. Just the other day, my silver rocket followed the same fate. There are rumours that it's the handiwork of a tiny dinosaur. It's got a real jivvy name like Compy or something. April 3rd. Today I heard an interesting story. Crows and other birds have a peculiar behaviour of collecting shiny things. It appears as though these compies may have similar behaviours. Come to think of it, all of the missing items were all shiny things. They seem to have a lot of similarities with the birds. It could be that they are their ancestors. We haven't been able to capture any of them since they are so quick on their feet, but if we use their behaviour to our advantage, then maybe... April 6th. We've used a cage used for laboratory animals and we were finally able to capture one of them. We used Alan's bracelet as a bait and cornered him in. The key to capturing it is to block all possible escape routes. Even a small escape route, they will not enter the cage. Our plan is to use this cage to get rid of them as fast as we can. The raptors who eat them for snacks have started to roam around this area. Compies. What a nuisance. There are still 2 more weeks until the general research staff can move into Edward City. Until then, we have to do our best to protect this facility from the dinosaurs. So yeah, much like as the researcher's memo suggests, you kind of just want to be doing this, luring him through, closing off all of these hatches until the only way in is the cage where we originally found the Compsognathus Dino file. Although contrary to what it says, you don't actually have to close off all routes. As we'll see, there's actually a hatch near where the cage is that I completely forget to close off, and it doesn't matter, it actually makes a beeline for the cage. I think just because I came at it at just the right angle. It's basically just a herding simulator, and the compy tends to just run the opposite direction of where you are. So as you can see, I'm kind of like taking the long way around to try and scooch him into the cage, and in he goes. A very weird section of the game just to break up all the combat. I often thought this music would be more fitting for like a section where you're being hunted by something you can't kill. Like, it gives me very much like Dead Space when you come across the Regenerator vibes, as opposed to chasing a tiny dinosaur into a cage. But hey, you know, I'm not a game designer. I don't know. I'm just throwing out my 2 cents for what it's worth. Interestingly enough, I mean, that's the only time you come across any compies during the main game, and you don't have to fight any of them. But you can actually play as a compy in the Dino Arena after the mini game after you've completed this. And again, check out that video. It's pretty good. But you can play as a compy in that. And it's kind of hilarious because the compy will die in one hit. But also, it has this just permanent like lunging animation you can do with it. And if you just mash the attack button and run around the arena, you basically can't get hit because you're moving so fast. So you just become this tiny ninja of death that's like something out of a Monty Python skit when the rabbit's just going around biting everyone's heads off. It's really bizarre. And here what we came for, the starter battery for our ship. Report on unidentified body. Another dead body of a youth was carried in. As suspected, he was not a resident of Edward City. If this is really true, then the only possible conclusion is that he and the others must have come from another time. Could such a thing be possible? Over the past few months, youths of about 17 or 18 have shown up before and attacked. Communications with these youths have not been successful, but rather impossible. Today we plan to remove one of the bodies out of the preservation liquid and conduct an autopsy. The result of the autopsy will be reported to Colonel Mason, who is dispatched at the Third Energy Facility. So yeah, apparently they're not all biker lesbians, some of them are actually male. Anyway, it gives us opportunity to see the Oviraptors a little bit more in action, and these will basically become like a common enemy type at this point. Even some places where you would normally expect raptors, these can prop up, just to mix it up a little bit. And I do imagine part of that is just because they're quite similar and damn, that was close. Yeah, whenever you change weapons, make sure you change your sub-weapon back. I was just incredibly lucky there that I thought I had the firewall. I had the machete and it just happened to hit him in midair. So that's possible, you can do that, that's good to learn. But every time you change weapons, it will automatically default to either your machete or to your like electric baton. So if ever you are transitioning from a two-handed weapon to a one-handed weapon, just make sure you remember that, because it's it's very easy to get caught out otherwise, especially if you are playing on those hard difficulties. Like I said, health is very, very limited. Even these Oviraptors will take off like a third of your health from every one of the attacks. I actually find them to be much tougher enemies than raptors, although they are smaller and you can see they tend to take less damage. Like, you can get close to the shotgun and just almost like blow the head off. But they're a lot more nimble and maneuverable, and they have this almost comical like flying drop kick attack. Kind of strange that they decided to put that in. So they have the one we just saw there, where it's kind of like a standard kind of jump in the air, almost like a leap attack. Very similar to what the Velociraptors do. But there's quite a lot of times where you're just moving through and you'll just see one just RKO out of nowhere, just a friggin' drop kick out of the side of a frame and take you out. And although they're small, they pack a punch with those attacks. So I much prefer like using faster firing weapons than shotguns, just because of that aspect. But if not, then generally the way to deal with them is quite similar to the Velociraptors. Just back yourself into a corner, especially with the shotgun, and then you can hit multiple at the same time, and you do kill them a lot quicker. But anyway, this gives us an opportunity to use the solid cannon on the Allosaurus, which is even better than the flamethrower for just stun locking him. We don't have as many rounds, obviously only 50 compared to 300, but you won't need that much. The damage the solid cannon does is really significant. I'm not a big fan of using it for like just normal raptors and Oviraptors, just because of how, yeah, that was, what, that would have been 28 rounds, it's not bad. But yeah, it's a very short-ranged weapon, and as such, I'm not a big fan of using it for either raptors, actually, either the Oviraptor or the Velociraptor, just because it requires them to get up close, and also with it not having too many rounds, like, it kind of encourages you to run at the enemies and take them out. As such, I think it is best used to take out Allosauruses and other larger creatures, whereas the raptors, trusty shotgun, trusty 12 gauge, it's got a good spread. You can't go wrong with with a shotgun that never needs to have more bullets put in it. It doesn't even need to be pumped. Like, he never pumps that thing. He never puts more shells into it. It just holds 200 shotgun shells like a street sweeper and just keeps on going. You know, it's, you know, at this point in time where we are able to travel through time and have all this temporal stuff, you know, it's, you know, having a magazine that's like the TARDIS and much bigger on the inside doesn't seem that far-fetched. I imagine it'd be probably quite heavy, but you know, it's doable. And yeah, we're just going to make our way back to the ship. Most of the section's kind of just padding. They're going to throw a combination of raptors, Allosauruses, Oviraptors at you. But it's really just a case of getting back to the ship, and it gives you plenty of opportunity to stock up on the points you might need for some of the goodies later. Because when we take over and next time as Regina, she gets 2 new weapons to use, both of which are incredibly expensive. And I did often wonder why they... I know some of the pricing, especially as I said, they want you to kind of speedrun. It seems a bit off at times. When I first played through this, before I did this walkthrough for it, and I was just getting to grips with it again, you know, just having a good time playing through it, getting some nostalgia, I straight up struggled to buy some of the weapons without like grinding in certain areas, and that was also because I wasn't nearly as practiced as I was for this walkthrough. I wasn't getting nearly as many no-hit clearances, and because I wasn't getting so many areas where I wasn't getting hit, I was then also spending a lot more on health items, which meant I had even less to buy the weapons that I needed. And as such, I found it so difficult to even buy all the weapons. I'm fairly certain when I went through it, I didn't even with some grinding, there was at least one weapon I never ended up buying. I'm fairly certain there's like a rocket launcher you can get right at the end, which I just never got. And to be fair, and it's, as I said, why there should have been a little bit more towards the end, that rocket launcher is basically used for one encounter, and that's it. I don't know, I love this game, and I'm fully prepared to admit that a very large part of that love comes from my nostalgia. My granddad would always pick me up from secondary school. Secondary school? That's not what it's called. Primary school. I was walking home at secondary school. But yeah, a lot of times my parents would work late, and my actually step-granddad technically, and Nan weren't, you know, they were retired, so they used to pick me up and walk me home from school, and I used to stay there for like an hour before my parents would come pick me up before they were finished. And that's when I ended up playing a lot of like PlayStation 1 games that I really shouldn't have been, because I would have been, what, like 4 or 5 years old, I want to say, around that ballpark. And my granddad was always very behind the times on buying stuff, so he would always, and I think part of that was, you know, with it being a pension, he didn't get a ton of money. Also, he spent most of it at the pub. But what money he did get, he would usually buy games that were like secondhand, and so, you know, he was mostly playing PlayStation 1 when the PlayStation 2 era was coming out, and then we moved on to PlayStation 3, he was doing PlayStation 2. He was always like one generation behind, bless him. But like, as a kid, I was playing Resident Evil, Dino Crisis, and he was the one that would always talk, and he's so good with kids. I have to admit, now that I'm a little bit older, I struggle a little bit with him because he's fantastic with kids, but trying to actually hold an adult conversation, he just wants to talk about games, and I never thought the day would come where it's like, yeah, I want to talk about something other than games. And he would always like, he would play through Dino Crisis, and he'd have like this little notebook that would show all the different passwords and everything, and the areas would come through. And I remember, I think it was Clock Tower 3, I want to say, which I have looked into. I'd like to do a walkthrough of that as well, just because I have nostalgia for it for the same reason. All of like the main game he would complete, all of the puzzles he would complete, and he was stuck on the final boss. And I remember just coming up home after school and just for 2 hours playing it over and over until I could beat this boss for him. The rest of the game I couldn't do, like even like the first encounter, like all of it, going through the anything involving puzzles I was too dumb to figure out, but boss encounters I was good at. So my granddad would do most of the game, and then whenever we'd get stuck on something, I would come in because I had the perseverance to just keep smashing my head against that wall until I beat it. And I suppose that's why I ended up being pretty good at Dark Souls. I got used to the sadomasochism of not sadomasochism, just masochism, not sadomasochism. But yeah, I got used to the masochism of just forcing myself through something. But yeah, I'm fully prepared to admit that most of my love for this game probably does come from nostalgia. I mean, having an action game with fixed camera angles, not the greatest idea. It happened a little bit in Devil May Cry, but there was a hell of a lot more flexibility in that before they finally figured out and managed to upgrade to, you know, full 3D camera. But saying that, I think it does, you know, it has charm to it, and I think a big reason for that is the pre-rendered backgrounds. Dino Crisis 1 is a classic. Regina is a classic. If ever you've watched, there's a YouTuber called Sphere Hunter who is phenomenal with any of these kind of games. She actually spoke to the voice actor of Leon S. Kennedy, who sadly passed away not too long ago. But she is just great at it. She talks about Regina, how badass she is. And, you know, check her out. Sphere Hunter, really, really good channel. But despite all its charm, I don't think Dino Crisis 1 aged quite as well, just because the backgrounds look so plain and so out there. Whereas this one, because it has those pre-rendered backgrounds, it has an almost timeless quality to it. Same with like Final Fantasy 7 or 8 or something. Those, like, it's almost like paintings for backgrounds. They look good no matter how much time passed. It's an aesthetic choice, and I feel like Dino Crisis 2 stands the test of time a little bit better because of it.
Huh? She's gone.
Yeah, I can see that. You know what else is weird? I've checked the stats on all the residents and soldiers, but I couldn't find any profile fitting her description. It's like she doesn't exist.
Well, I was thinking, maybe she's not one of the survivors at all. What if those helmet people are from a completely different time than ours?
What?
Never mind. We found parts that might help fix the ship. But what matters now is we still haven't found any survivors or helpful data, so we must move on and search elsewhere.
This control panel is programmed to search for the areas where we can dock. Use it.
Right.
We're surrounded.
Don't worry. I'll take care of this.
So from this part moving forward, the game kind of just hits you with set piece after set piece. You don't have much breathing room because there's always something new coming along, which I suppose is one of the reasons why I loved it so much. There was always these great moments that I couldn't wait to get back to on repeat playthroughs. So for this part, you man the machine gun, and as you can see, as I'm completely failing to hit the Plesiosaurus here, you have infinite ammo, so there is absolutely no reason to ever take your finger off the trigger. And it might seem like I suck at aiming, that's partially true, but there's a reason actually you see me kind of just keeping the trigger, the crosshairs relatively high and strafing back and forth. So as we progress through this section, we start off, and this is like section 1 of 3. So section 1, you can be hit with a large number of Plesiosauruses that just keep coming out. And if you manage to score a good headshot on them, they go down in one, whereas opposed to neck shots, they'll take several. The aiming for it is a little bit wonky, for lack of a better term. So sometimes it will look like you've hit them, like, or rather it looks like you shot to like the right of their head, but it counts as a hit just because of the way the hitboxes work. So I've always found the best way to deal with this is to kind of just keep it relatively high up like this and just keep strafing left and right, prepared for any attacks. And this is us entering through to the second stage where you're going to get hit by a bunch of pterodons. I was calling them pterodactyls earlier, but they're technically pterodons, where I move a little bit more. But for the most part, the game will tell you when there's an enemy to the left or right hand side of the screen, so you don't get caught off guard. But for the most part, you kind of want to keep it relatively high up, because that's roughly the right area to hit the Plesiosaurus' heads, and also to take out the pterodons here. So yeah, this last section gets incredibly hectic, and in all honesty, just keep strafing, don't stop. It is so easy to rack up an insane combo, and it's why later on I would always come across blue raptors, and I was wondering what the hell, because there's a very large section after this where you don't have any opportunity to fight raptors. So the game spawns the blue raptors in the next opportunity you get, and it's like half an hour later, and it's like, what the fuck? And for ages I just always assumed that they just spawned there. I didn't realise that what it was is, during this absolute clusterfuck, you rack up such an insane combo that was what was triggering the blue raptors to go up later. But yeah, just this took an insane amount of practice to get right. Just keep strafing, keep aiming high to take them out of the headshots. Do not let go of that trigger figure, and eventually you will come out the other side. And there we go. It's finally clear, and we're headed our way to Edward City.
Sharp shooter, aren't you? Hang around the arcades much?
Oh man, do you remember arcades? I'm sure they still exist. I've been to the seaside a few times, and they still exist. And it's like a blast from the past, because they're just so niche nowadays. I came across a couple of the shoot games in there. The shooting games. There was like a Walking Dead one with like a crossbow in it or something. And all I could think was, God damn, why couldn't we just have a House of the Dead? That'd be perfect. But yeah, we're going to take the compliment from Regina, as outdated as it is, and save them up for the cold, sarcastic months. And with that section complete, we have two new weapons, a heavy machine gun and a rocket launcher, and we don't have enough points to buy both of them. So for the time being, we're just going to grab the heavy machine gun and buy a couple of the tools. So the silver card we bought means that the combo string will last longer, so it makes it easier for us to rack up our combos, and also an upgrade for her side weapon, her little baton, which doesn't really help much. There's also one for the machete. And in addition, we now have a suit, which means that we won't be bleeding. So, I mean, we haven't taken any damage thus far, but it does mean that we save in any of those kind of like HEMA packs. So it means we can just focus on just straight up healing, which is nice. Now, the heavy machine gun for this section is borderline broken. And this is just, this section's just satisfying because it's really, really easy. It's probably the easiest section to get through, and yet it just throws points at you. So as you walk through these walkways, much like when we were riding on the boat, you're going to be accosted by these Plesiosauruses. And rather than just go crazy on them, what you want to do is fire in just very small rounds, like one or two, just like single shot basically. And usually they'll take only about 3 rounds, sometimes they'll take less, even like just 2 rounds or something. Usually like between 1 to 3, maybe 1 to 4 rounds. And with the silver card especially, it is so easy to rack up these combos. So you just want to kind of conserve your ammo, because this section is quite long. And every time you kill these, they give you 400 points, whereas the raptors and Oviraptors would usually only give you 100. So already you can see just points. Just points. Drip it all over me. And you kind of need to, because the missile launcher, I say that's a missile launcher, not a rocket launcher. Dylan gets the rocket launcher, Regina gets the missile launcher. But the missile launcher you can pick up costs 100,000, so you need those points. And yeah, 22,000 points just for doing that. 10,000 for no damage. And I just remember this as a kid because it is so easy to get the no damage multipliers in this section. These things are so slow and take so long to get near to you, you have to be half asleep to let them hit you. Interesting enough, they are way bigger than what they'd actually be. So these are Plesiosauruses, and we know this because we come across the Dino file a little bit later on. But they were not this big, which is kind of strange because we also come across another underwater dinosaur in the Mosasaurus, which is much smaller but should have been much bigger. So it's almost like the sizes of the Plesiosaurus and the Mosasaurus should have been swapped around. For those of you who perhaps aren't dino geeks, because why would you be? It's a very niche area. But for those of you who have seen Jurassic World, the Mosasaurus is the creature that's in the giant lake area that like reaches up and snatches the whale or the dolphin or whatever it was and eats it. And also the one that takes out a few other characters. I won't spoil it in case you haven't seen it. Not that I consider it a particularly good movie. I'm a old school Jurassic Park purist, and I wasn't a big fan of all the Jurassic World ones, but it's still a dick thing to do. But that's the Mosasaurus if you have seen it, just so you have a point of reference of how big they're supposed to be. And the ones we come across later on are very small, and I can only assume that they're all meant to be baby Mosasauruses. I don't know. It just feels again like one of those situations where they should have swapped the sizes round, much like with Jurassic Park. Dilophosaurus was actually really big, although we see a tiny one in the first movie. And Velociraptors were really small. We see them the size of Utah raptors. But yeah, just continue forward. We do get a few pterodactyls. I keep saying it. Pteradons. And you can use a submachine gun for this or the heavy machine gun. I'm a real big fan of using the heavy machine gun just because you're not just spraying bullets out. It feels a lot more controlled. And I have to admit, I much prefer using this more like a rifle than a machine gun. But in hindsight, we probably should have given it at least one ammo upgrade because it's already down to the last 50 or so rounds. And there's still a pretty significant section to go through. But regardless, a lot of good points to be picking up. And just keep on working your way through. Pteranodon. Meaning, winged and toothless. Length, 3 meters. Wingspan, 6 meters. Observation records. They mostly feed on fish. These flying reptiles are typically found near lakesides. They hover and glide over the water searching for fish, then with tremendous speed they dive to snatch their prey. Although their diet consists mainly of fish, they also feed on small animals and even on mammals like us humans. Lately, the pteranodons have started to attack on humans near the facility trying to fight for their territory. Combat notes. When they are circling above you, it is very hard to shoot them. Although they seem to be flying slowly, but in fact are flying fairly fast. Before they attack their prey, they will come and surround you. That's when you should shoot them down. One thing you have to remember is that their skin of armor is thicker than it appears, and if you are too busy trying to shoot one down, the others will attack you off guard. To lessen the chance of this happening, it is important to choose an appropriate weapon. Soldiers' papers. It looks like this is the end for us. After surviving all this time, and to be killed by humans. Who are they? Those people with the full face helmets and the rider suits. Somehow I managed to escape, but I seem to have dropped the key for this facility. How foolish of me. I can only think of one place where it might be. I must have dropped it somewhere near the spring in the jungle. That spring has rather a fast current considering its small size. I must go there quickly, or else it may drift away somewhere. The disc I was to deliver Colonel Mason has been stolen by the helmets. I believe that the data is about some kind of autopsy. So yeah, ordinarily that would give you a hint that the card key that you need to get into the facility has been lost, and that would be where you'd normally backtrack to pick it up. But because we've already played this game before, we know where the card key is. It always spawns in the same location. It does seem strange that they wouldn't have gone through some effort to make it spawn in like a few different locations and then like different files generate, and then whatever file is generated tells you where to go, or even to make it so that the card key doesn't appear until you come across said file. Because it does seem like Dino Crisis 2 was made for replayability, just the way it was built up, and yet they put something out there where you can just completely sequence break it on like second playthroughs onwards, which is exactly what we've done just to try and save time It's one of the few times where the game actually kind of wants you to do a bit of backtracking. As I said, from this point onwards, it's pretty breakneck with constantly new things being thrown at us. Ordinarily, you would head back and then, you know, that would be a little bit of a lull, but obviously we're not doing that, so don't have that coming up. But, and yeah, it just seems like a strange design choice, and I remember as a kid, because I'd only get like an hour to play after I got picked up, and so a playthrough would take place over the course of days or even weeks, that I would, every time I did do a new game playthrough, I would always forget to go and grab it, and I'd go, Mum's coming in 10 minutes, god damn it, I wanted to get to the underwater section. Yeah, there's an underwater section coming, I shouldn't have, so fuck it, it'll be up in 10 minutes, I've not spoiled that far ahead. And what we're going to do, we're just going to see how far we can rack up this combo. For some strange reason, they just seem to keep spawning here. I'm already well out of heavy machine gun ammunition at this point, so I'm just having to use my submachine guns and trying to angle it in such a way to like shoot 2 at a time. And as I said, it's not just, and I did suspect this for a while, I was like, maybe the heavy machine gun just counters these Plesiosaurus really hard. But as we can see there, even the submachine gun absolutely decimates them. They're such an easy foe that gives so many points. I just find it really strange. Like, they could have at least made them a tiny bit tankier, but they fall incredibly easy. It's odd. But with all of those points, we do now have enough for our missile launcher, as well as any other upgrades that we weren't able to pick up before, so we might as well move on over and grab those. The great thing about this missile launcher is that it is fantastic at taking out the Pteranodons. When you fire it in the air, and these 3 missiles will just fly through and just seek out any targets by themselves. So it's kind of just a go in the corner, point, forget. The only real weakness of it, as you can see, it only holds 20 rounds at start. So it's very easy to quickly run out of ammunition with it. I'd say that's like the only real weakness to it. But as far as, also, I say the only real weakness to it. I'm not actually a big fan of using it in most situations because it's very easy for the rockets, if you fire them, to go off in some weird direction, and it spends so long actually coming down to take out the target you're trying to go for that you end up getting hit. So I like using them to take out the Pteranodons, and there's a couple of tougher dinosaurs later on that it's useful for, but much like with the solid cannon or with the flamethrower, when you're facing faster raptors or the Oviraptors, I much prefer to stick to another weapon. In fact, the heavy machine gun is my weapon of choice with Regina. It's just so great. I mean, you can, if you get into a panic mode where you're being overwhelmed, you can just fire it full auto and just mow down whatever's in front of you. But using it kind of like how the SAS are in like a kind of tactical LMG section, it does tremendous amounts of damage. I was about to say it's highly accurate. I mean, every gun's technically accurate in this game. I suppose you could argue that the spread of the shotgun means that there's a DPS drop-off the further away you get, but in terms of just damage, yeah, it's brilliant. The security code for the elevator to the underwater third energy reactor has been changed. The new code number is 5210. See, that's exactly my point. The code that you get from that, and the reason I did have to backtrack there rather than just move forward, is because that code changes each playthrough. There's like, I think like 8 or 9 different ones that it can be. So the developers clearly knew enough about people sequence breaking the game to include that in, but not with the card key. I guess they kind of just assumed that it was going to be a way to save time. Maybe they kind of knew it was a bit of a backtracking section anyway, and so they wanted a way to get past it. I don't know, it seems bizarre to me that they would do it in one section but not another. Like, the whole backtracking thing, it's almost like they put that in because they're like, oh shit, these players don't have enough points to buy these weapons. Let's make some backtracking, 1 to pad the game out a little bit more, and 2 to make sure that they can gain a few more points. It's like, well, you could have just lowered the cost of some of the weapons. 100,000 for the missile launcher is a bit of a piss take. I know you don't technically need to get the missile launcher, you can just not, and in all honesty, I think the heavy machine gun is more useful in more situations. The heavy machine gun is just all-round fantastic weapon for almost every situation. So that's my detailed analysis on the sub. Manager's diary, mechanic. June 2nd, 2:30 PM. Tomorrow afternoon, 2 mechanics are coming to this facility from Edward City. It is time for the annual maintenance check of the 3rd energy reactor. This will be the 9th time. The instant something happens to the underwater reactor, that is when all lifelines will be cut off to us. Again, all we can do is pray that nothing will happen. As weird as it may sound, sometimes I feel that it will do us all a favour if that reactor just blew up on us. June 3rd, 4 PM. The mechanics who went to the underwater 3rd energy reactor still have not returned. They probably became their lunch. This is a problem. One of the mechanics, Bob, has the key to the entrance of Edward City. To go from this facility to the city, it is critical that we get back the key. I guess there is no real choice but to get in the diving suit and go down myself. I just hope I don't become their dinner. Mosasaurus. Meaning? River of Mosa lizard. Length 6 meters. Height 0.8 meters. Observation record. Their main diet seems to be the ammonites which live in the bottom of the waters. During breeding season, many Mosasaurus gather near the facility in search of food. The jaws which are strong enough to crush even the hardest shells are without a doubt a threat to us humans. Even the hardest diver suit will not stand up to a Mosasaurus bite. Despite their large size, they are able to swim quickly. Their mobility is extraordinary. Combat notes. The first thing to do in stopping them, shooting needles is one way, but the most effective way is to blast them with the shockwave and knock them out. Shockwaving them is especially useful when there are multiple enemies. They like to hide in small places, so you should be cautious near walls where there are holes and openings. So all of that is kind of just foreshadowing to show that we're about to enter through our underwater section, which I absolutely loved as a kid. Coming back to it as an adult, it fucking sucks. As you might expect being underwater, you lose access to all of the weapons you've acquired thus far and have to use specific underwater weapons. So for the next half hour, you are stuck using a needle gun, a torpedo when you buy it, or a torpedo launcher, you'll just ride a torpedo around, and this shockwave as your sub-weapon. And everything takes on a much slower pace when you're underwater, again, as you'd probably imagine. And I think that's part of the reason why it gives you access to the silver card at this point, just because it's very difficult to string combos together, because the time to kill for the enemies you're going to come across is much higher using the weapons that you have access to than what you're usually been accustomed to up until this point. We have a little puzzle to do, so make sure you equip your little red stick and let's get to it.
Reactivating main power. Please check computer until power is supplied to all devices. Warning. When power is overloaded, this reactivation process will be suspended.
So this is relatively simple to do, and I think it's largely just because you're going to come across a similar puzzle to this later on, which is much more difficult and also has a time limit attached. This is almost like a training exercise, essentially. So just face the wall, and every time one of them starts to blink red, just give it a good old whack. And you have quite a large arc with your weapon. I mean, I haven't really been using neither the machete or the stun baton, I can't remember the name of it, much up until this point. So this is one of the opportunities you get to really make use of it. And you have a very large arc, which means the 2 panels on the right hand side, you can actually hit both of them with one swing. It's actually quite generous with timing, so it shouldn't be something that you struggle with too much.
Main power reactivation restored.
So one aspect I do have to give the game credit for is the environmental storytelling here. When we go to put the diving suit on, there's only one left because, as we've seen from the files, the rest of them have been used by the engineers and subsequently they've been eaten. Mechanic's note. To Bob. I heard that you were placed in charge of this area. As a present for your new position, here is a memo which may come in handy. It's about restarting the power. When you try to initialize the power restarting program, it often stops, right? Well, it's due to the malfunctioning of the three control terminals. Here are some tips to operate it. When you initialize the program, it quickly overloads and the lamp turns red, right? Well, when that happens, all you need to do is just give it some electric shock with some kind of tool. It should wake the sucker up. Anyway, good luck. See ya, Mike.
Warning. Object blocking elevator shaft. Emergency shutdown.
Well,
So all of your weapons are taken away from this underwater bit, and instead as your sub-weapon you have this kind of like shockwave, which you are going to want to make liberal use of to take out the Mosasaurus. You'll find that you start with a needle gun, which thankfully at least has unlimited ammo, so you don't just get yourself caught in a shitty situation. And once you fire like 3 or 4 shots, you can see there's a pain animation. So once you start firing on them, they can't hurt you back, but it takes about 3, 4, maybe even 5 shots before that pain animation goes in, which is why when they get close to you, it's so important to hit them with the shockwave. When they're at a distance, you can kind of like do it, but as you can see here, because of the angle he was coming in at, I stopped actually hitting him and I was just shooting air, and again had to use the shockwave to stop from having a big old chunk taken out of me. Now, I find the underwater section to be quite dangerous. One, you're incredibly slow, which is an issue. It's a lot harder to avoid damage, but also whenever you're like dropping down or floating, you can't use your shockwave, which makes you incredibly vulnerable to damage. So before you, and there's quite a few sections where you have to make like a little jump or you have to drop down somewhere. Whenever you get to those sections, I strongly recommend like aiming your weapon like I've just did there, just to see if there's any enemies nearby before you make the plunge, because if you get caught midway through falling down, you're likely going to take some damage. Now, fortunately for us, we've managed to save up quite a lot of points already, which means we can go ahead and get rid of this crappy needle gun basically straight away and instead upgrade it to the torpedo launcher, which most times when I used to play this as a kid, I wouldn't have enough points to get this until at least halfway through this particular section. Only comes with 30 rounds, so we're going to go ahead and upgrade it to carry a bit more ammunition because we've got plenty of points too. And this makes it a hell of a lot easier. I mean, we always had the shockwave in case they do get too close, but as you've no doubt noticed, the needle gun that we have is not a very effective weapon. So we're going to use this instead, and this section should be a relative breeze as a result. Preventative maintenance. As always, we'll conduct the preventative maintenance by assigning labour tasks. Bob will be in charge of the third energy reactor itself. Alec will be in charge of checking the water circulation system. As in previous years, for the safety of the mechanics, during maintenance work, make sure to close the shutters for the cooling aqueducts. Alec will unplug the plug which allows control of the shutter and keep it until Bob is done checking the reactor. The other day there was an explosion in the water circulation chamber. This explosion caused a crack in one of the concrete columns. One more explosion would have probably destroyed it. Remember to repair that as well. So that file was just another way of letting us know that there's something that's going to require explosives, and so it strongly hints that you need to get the torpedo launcher to be able to take it out, which I do appreciate, especially with a lot of the older PlayStation 1 games. A lot of times you'll come across like an area where the game tells you need to destroy something. So you're like, oh, okay, fair enough. So you throw like grenades at it, you throw bombs at it, nothing happens. And the reason is because you need to pick up a key item specific like set of C4, and only by placing that does it work. None of the explosives work, which always bugged the crap out of me. But this game actually has, not environmental damage, it's like one thing you can destroy. But it lets you know that you just shoot it and it works. There's no explosives used under here, so I appreciate that, because it's very easy to miss it, especially when everything always has pre-rendered backgrounds. You kind of get into the mindset that, okay, nothing in the background is something you can like interact with. Especially with, say, Dino Crisis 1 and 2, because unlike with the Resident Evil games where you have an item, it's an item in the environment, and then it'll be like flashing to let you know you can pick it up. With this game, with the Dino files, and okay, not so much on this one, but the previous one when you picked up ammunition, it's just like a floating box, like Metal Gear Solid. So you would assume there's something you can interact with. It sticks out almost like a Tom and Jerry cartoon, or like an old Scooby-Doo cartoon where there's like 6 doors and you can tell which one's going to open because it's shaded slightly different colour to the rest of it. But moving forward, we make relatively short work of these Mosasauruses now with the torpedo launcher. It only takes 2 hits to take them out, and we don't really need to worry about using the shockwave. It's still there if they get too close, because it does help us gain a little bit of distance. It has a bit of a pushback to it, which is kind of strange actually, because you wouldn't really expect it to work like that underwater. I mean, you seem to have your feet quite planted. If you're in space, then yeah, because you're in a vacuum. But in water, you actually have more resistance on you. But yeah, game logic. And one of the reasons why, I mean, I love the change in atmosphere that it brings. But one of the reasons why gameplay-wise I'm not a huge fan of it is because it becomes almost like this pseudo-platforming segment where you have to jump over these areas. And fixed camera angle is not great for platforming, especially there's at least one jump where the camera almost changes, like this one. In fact, I think there's at least a couple where the camera will change mid-jump, and it's just so disorientating. One thing you'll notice that I'm doing, every time you come to a jump, as I said before, you're incredibly vulnerable whilst you're in the air. You can technically move and shoot, but when you go to land, you have to plant your feet before you can attack again. So every time I come to a point where it looks like I'm going to have to jump over something, you notice I keep aiming my gun to like there, just to see if there's anything around, and relying on the game's auto aim to point me in the right direction if there is something coming by. And that was the concrete slab we need to destroy, otherwise we can't actually jump up to it. But I find a lot more important here than other aspects of the game, because a lot of times when you're fighting the other dinosaurs, if one appears on screen, they'll usually make some kind of like appearance noise. Like the raptors will have like a little bit of a growl, the Oviraptors will have like a chirp or something. Because we're underwater, we can't really hear all that much. And if you listen closely, whenever a Mosasaurus does appear, you'll hear like this heavier gushing of water in the background. But it is so easy to mistake that for just the natural ambient sounds and to completely miss it. So because we're forced to move quite slowly anyway, we're not able to run underwater, just smidge along every now and then, and just make sure you aim the gun just in case there is something coming out, in case you happen to miss the noise as they appear, especially if ever you're about to do a jump, or if ever the screen changes. Like, I mean, it kind of changed a few times here. And unfortunately, although the torpedo does kill him in only 2 hits, it's also a bit janky, because they can attack you from above. It's kind of like fighting the pterodactyls. Sorry, pterodons. I'll get it right. Pteranodons, that's the one. I'll get it right eventually. It's kind of similar to that, in which if they're directly above you, your angle of attack cannot shoot directly up. So it's really easy to just get yourself into a really shit situation with it. especially around this area, because as soon as you come through, there'll be a couple that try to attack you, but because you have the bottom part of the shutter kind of blocking you off, it's quite difficult to actually land your shot. So you see the first one's gone in, and I really struggled to actually hit them. One thing you can do, if you press R1 and then press L1, you will change targets, which is good if you're about to be hit by the one you're not presently locked on. And yeah, managed to just about avoid that grab attack. Very awkward fighting in that enclosed environment. And just not just the fact that you can't aim up, but also with it, the torpedo actually having a projectile rather than being a hit scan like the more bullet-based projectile weapons that you have. The travel time means that not only are you sometimes struggling to actually aim at the damn things, but even if you are able to aim at them, there's now a delay before your projectile arrives where they can scooch out the way. I mean, fortunately it has a relatively generous hitbox, and fortunately you also can't hurt yourself with it, so you don't have to worry about blowing yourself up. There's a Mosasaurus right in front of you. You can use the shockwave if it just feels wrong, but as far as I'm aware, there's no friendly fire in this game. There's nothing that you can use to hurt yourself, so it would be a bit weird to have an action game with friendly fire. I don't think any of the Devil May Cries have that. I'm not as familiar with them as I'm Resident Evil. I know there's like one weapon that you can use to charge up, and it like drains your devil power. And I think if you charge that up too long, it can hurt you. But actual explosives hurting you because you're too close, I don't think that's the case, but don't quote me on that. And same with Resident Evil, to be fair. The older titles, at least, so the era that Dino Crisis 2 is from, I'm fairly certain you can't hurt yourself with any kind of explosives. Like the grenade launcher, even if you fire at point blank range, you can't hurt it. Whereas something like Resident Evil 5 or Resident Evil 4, if you fire an RPG at your feet, yeah, you're going to blow yourself up. But these older ones, I know they didn't include that for many reasons, I imagine. Just, yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be fun. You're wearing a suit, it protects you against backdraft, it's fine. So yeah, I'd say around 80 torpedoes is enough to get you through this section of the game, because this is the only underwater section we come across. We're not going to retread with these weapons, so 40,000 to buy it, and then upgrade it to about 80 torpedoes, restock it whenever you get the opportunity to, and that should see you relatively comfortably through this section. There really isn't a huge amount to it. Ordinarily, where we just went through, before we start jumping up on things to do the platforming segment to get the plug, there is another door which you would go through, and you'd see that there would be some shutters that were shut. And if you didn't have enough points to pick up the torpedo launcher when we did, that's usually the point. It's like, oh, I should probably grab this. And that's when you backtrack, blow up, put the plug in. So there's only a handful of rooms for this section, but they really make you kind of like dredge back and forth through it a few times. I imagine trying to get everything working. Oh, I killed him one hit. Since it was a counter, it seems to just take him out one torpedo. I imagine it probably was a little bit difficult getting all of the underwater environments to look right. I mean, even just like the wavy motion. I don't know a huge amount about game like coding, especially not older ones. I know a little bit more about more modern ones just from using mods for like Oblivion and whatnot. But older games, I don't know how on earth they would code that. So I don't know if it was difficult or not, and as such they wanted to keep it short. I mean, maybe they wanted it to seem like you were really figuring something out rather than it being linear, because let's face it, most of the game thus far has been relatively linear. So maybe they wanted to put in a few more puzzle elements. I don't know, maybe they was like, oh, we can do something with it being underwater, add some platforming, because people love platforming, especially in games that you can't control the camera. That's always a fantastic idea, never gone wrong. Don't know what you're talking about, shut up, fuck you. But I think one of the main reasons why the torpedo launcher at this point is used environmentally, and I suppose you can make the argument that we had to use the flamethrower to progress earlier, so there is already precedent in the game to hopefully get you thinking that way. But I think the main reason they want you to take something out is because there's kind of a boss encounter coming up, and the game does not want you fighting it with just a needle gun. I have to admit, of all the times I've played this, I've never actually tried to challenge myself and take it out with the needle gun to even see if it's possible. I imagine it should be, like, I wouldn't expect it to be completely immune to damage, but it's at the very least going to be very inefficient and liable to get you chomped on, so yeah, I would not recommend it. Neither would the game. But anyway, this is what we came down here for, the keycard to Edward City, which means we are wrapping up the underwater section. Plesiosaurus. Meaning near lizard. Length 17 meters. Height 3 meters. Observation record. Our lifeline, the third energy reactor, is located in the lake underwater. Half of the mechanics who go under for preventative maintenance never come back. They probably become bait for that giant thing. They are carnivorous reptiles. With their long neck, they surface the head to breathe. It's been reported that they have been seen attacking the pteranodons from the water with their long, agile neck. When attacked by them, aim for their head. They'll try to pull their prey into the water using their long necks. When you are attacked, the best thing you can do is to fire back at them. When you encounter them in the water, unfortunately the only thing that will really hurt them is explosive artillery. You also have to be careful of the strong water current they produce when they swim. It may be wise to avoid fighting them in the water.
Switching to emergency power. Areas will be locked to prevent explosions.
So yeah, technically this is the exact same dinosaur we've been fighting on the land, which we were like 2 and 3 tapping with the heavy machine gun, the Plesiosaurus, but for whatever reason it's significantly tougher when we fight it underwater. I'm assuming, I mean, it's kind of hard to tell, but just on what you can see, it seems to be a much larger version than the ones we fought previously. So maybe, again, the previous ones were juveniles, maybe this one's been mutated to be larger and more aggressive because it's near the third energy. I mean, I know it's not nuclear power, but I'm not entirely certain. All I know is that this is a boss Plesiosaurus and is a hell of a lot tougher. And the biggest reason for this is, okay, so you have this torpedo launcher, but what you want to do is wait for it to get close before you start firing. And the reason for that is because the torpedoes have travel time. It is very easy that when you see it, you start firing, but it takes so long to hit its body that it ends up doing some damage on you. So you want to wait for it to get close enough that you basically shoot it in the face at point blank range. And that's like the only way to avoid taking damage, because otherwise you're trying to fire torpedoes at it, and because you shoot underneath it to go and fire at its body, the time it takes for the torpedo to hit it, it's already like munched you. But yeah, if you do that, it doesn't actually take all that many rounds. Even on this difficulty, it's like, what, 8 or 9 torpedoes?
The water current is presently normal.
Yeah, it's strange to have defense mode to protect something when the giant thing's already in the reactor. And I do find it quite strange whenever I go back and watch some of the videos of me fighting these bosses. This one in particular, I remember having to practice on for quite a while. because as I said, I kept firing under its head and I just kept getting taken out essentially. And it's weird when you do something right and then you go and rewatch your playthrough of it and it's like, god damn. I can do the boss, but I can't actually jump over the gap. Platforming is a hell of a lot more difficult, especially when the camera changes angles, than actually fighting bosses. But yeah, it's weird when you spend so long struggling with a section and just going over it, trying to optimize your strategy, and then once you do it right and you play it back, it's like, fuck me, that looks so easy. It looks so easy. Why was I ever struggling with that? And I suppose part of that's kind of like speedrunning, although when you watch a speedrun, it's a lot clearer to see kind of like the effort going in because they never stop moving. But even then, a lot of them, they just make it look so flawless. It's just like, oh yeah, you just keep running forward and jumping to, beat Mario in like 5 or 6 minutes. And it's like, yeah, but how many thousands of attempts did it take to do that? I remember watching one, it was like speed runs visualized, and it was showing all of the attempts this player had of the original Mario. I think it was like over 5,000 attempts, all compiled into one video, so you could see like all the different Marios go forward, and just the constant mess ups, basically at every single potential obstacle, because he's done so many. Like I said, like it was like 6,000 runs. He's gonna have fucked up basically everywhere at any point, at some point. And I think that was one of the old expressions. The master has failed more times than the apprentice has even tried. And it's true of anything. The only way to get better at something is to suck at it. Sucking at something is the first step to being kind of sort of good at something. Anyway, our underwater section's done. We are in Edward City, so we're going to pass it over to Dylan to take the reins for this part.
Welcome back. How's the water?
I don't recommend the diving in this resort.
Hey, this is David. Is anyone there? Answer me, over!
I knew you were alive.
Yo, Dylan! I found survivors here!
Really? We're about to give up. Where are you?
The place is Edward City. Hurry!
David! David!
Edward City? That's not far from here. Let's go!
So because we haven't really heard anything since, David, if you'll recall from the very first intro, David's like the Turok cosplaying wannabe who shot the T-Rex in the eye with the bazooka. So yeah, you can kind of tell he was going to be a recurring character because everyone else looked like generic soldiers, and then you have this freaking Native American looking motherfucker with a rocket launcher. Obviously he's going to turn up again. So we didn't have time to replenish ammunition last time we played as Dylan once we got to the ship. What we want to do is grab your solid cannon, because chances are there always seems to be blue raptors here, and as I mentioned before, I'm fairly certain it's because of the section when you're on the boat where you get quite a large combo. I think maybe we might have got another combo at some point when we were shooting the Plesiosauruses. I can't remember exactly how high that went up to, but if you don't end up going back to the start of the game to pick up the keycard, if you do pick it up when I did, then chances are you'll come across some blue raptors here, and solid cannon just happens to be a good way of dealing with them. And now this room here I feel is evil, because that's a freaking Allosaurus in the save room. That you have the little little control panel on the side there where you can upgrade, you can save your game, you can upgrade your weapons and get ammunition. And I don't know, it just seems wrong. It's kind of like whenever you go to whenever you're playing through a Resident Evil game and you get to a safe room and you hear that safe room music play, it's like, this is my safe spot. And then to violate it by having an enemy in it, it just feels almost like a sin. I remember there was I was watching someone play through Resident Evil 3 with like this mod which just made it insanely difficult, and like Nemesis just breaks down the door and starts chasing you in the safe room, and it's like, no, you're not allowed in here, this is my room. But it's just the one Allosaurus that comes through, so we fortunately, I mean, that's why every time I come to one of these I always try to restock my ammunition because you don't know what's going to be coming up. And with that, we have 2 new weapons we can grab. The anti-tank rifle, which I'm not entirely certain if that's really what they would call them. I know there were anti-tank rifles, but that was usually used more in World War I and World War II. I don't really think they use them much anymore. If you want something big that's actually going to do like that kind of damage, you usually call them anti-material rifles as opposed to anti-tank rifles. And I think a big reason for that is just because tank armor now is so thick that you're not going to get that kind of penetration from a weapon that's only held by one person. And this is me trying to buy some ammo upgrades and realizing I don't actually have enough point. In hindsight, and I can't remember how many points it is, I probably should have checked if I could get a little bit more for the chain mine, but I did not do that. But we have our anti-tank gun and our chain mine, which will come in very handy quite soon on. But because we were attacked by blue raptors on the area on the outside, obviously if we go back there's going to be more raptors. So shotgun and firewall I always find to be the best way to deal with those ones. None of the other weapons that, like, he doesn't have like a heavy machine gun like Regina. Most of his weapons are more powerful but a slower rate of fire, and as such the shotgun just tends to be the best one to deal with raptors and whatnot. But yeah, no, I don't really think they use anti-tank rifles anymore. They do still use anti-material rifles, but even back then the anti-tank rifles were more for like personnel carriers, so they could like penetrate through like light tanks. A little bit. I've been watching a lot of History Channel stuff. Like, I know when the Germans first started World War II, although everyone likes to think of like the Tiger tanks and whatnot, it was actually the Panzers that did most of the damage, and those are actually quite small tanks. You would class them as like light to medium tanks, not like the big behemoths that the Tigers ended up being. Inostrancevia, length 3.7 meters, height 1.2 meters. The cave route which leads to the city, it passes through a volcano. 2 years ago, the volcano suddenly started acting up. From about the same time, the four-legged creature began appearing. They seem to favour hot and dark places. We believe that these four-legged creatures were herbivores due to the scarcity of living organisms in the habitat. But when one of our men was attacked by them, we learned that they were actually omnivores. Although they are slow, we have to find a way to counter them. Combat record. We still have yet to find a way to fight them. It's the ultra-hard armour which they wear that makes them so tough. No regular firearm will hurt them. Their jaws are also very strong. Strong enough to even crush a helmet. The only effective way we know so far is when they attack, they stand on their hind legs. This is when you should shoot their stomach. It seems to be their weak point. Currently, a prototype weapon is in the late stages of development. This mine-like weapon, when complete, should flip them on their backs. But we don't know for sure if it will really work.
Look, this is David's mark.
That's very cautious of him.
That's how you survive. Let's look for another mark.
Okay, let's split up then.
So regardless, it's called an anti-tank rifle. It should really be called an anti-material rifle, but just going to let that slide. So we have a new dinosaur to contend with relatively soon. We just got this little lake area, which just flying out like the drop kick, man. I don't know why, like when they're making this game, it's just like, you know what that tiny raptor needs? It needs a wrestling move. Like, I appreciate it, but also what was their diet to come up with that? But on the approach to the volcano, there's quite a lot of these Oviraptors, which, like I said, because they're so small and so nimble, I do find them significantly more threatening than their larger Velociraptor, Ultra-raptor cousins. But once we get through them, we enter the volcano area, and we actually need the mine thrower to even be able to get into this. We need to use this to blow up. And again, it's the same system as when you're in the underground area. You can kind of tell, underwater area. You can kind of tell from the way that the rocks are different shape that it's a destructible environment. And the mine thrower, there's quite a few of these you can use. Not all of them will actually lead anywhere. Like that one I blew up and then I realized, wow, that does literally nothing. And we don't have too many rounds, so try and actually save your ammunition if you can. And these are the Inostrancevia, or however you pronounce them. So the best way to do this is to use the mine thrower to flip on their back and then just blast away. And as you can see, even when you shoot them on their stomach, they do actually take quite a lot of damage. Now, one thing I really shouldn't have done with that first one is that the anti-tank rifle, you're probably better off just shooting them normally. And the reason for this is because, as I've said before, we didn't get enough ammunition to really help us through this. The anti-tank rifle will be able to push through their armor, no problem. In fact, as you can see, it actually penetrates through one and hits the other one behind them. It is a shame we didn't manage to get a few more rounds for it. But they can deal with just shooting them normally. Once you run out of anti-material rifle, if you're anything like me and didn't have enough points to actually get more ammunition, then you want to be using the mine thrower in conjunction with other weapons, because most of the other weapons you have won't really do much to harm them unless you're able to flip them on their back. So use this gun just to shoot them normally, and then the line thrower, especially I find in conjunction with like the solid cannon, is a good way of dealing with them. I mean, if you're not in any kind of rush, I mean, I was trying to make the backtracking as limited as possible. I mean, obviously you could always come to this section and then just go back out, use the points you've gotten. You could have just avoided buying some of the weapons. You could have grinded. You could have done a lot of different things. But we're just going to make our way through this. And as you can see, yeah, it almost, even though you're very clearly firing like a slug, as you saw in one of those bits there, I shot two separate Inostrancevia, even though there's like a 6-foot gap between the two of them. Sometimes reason the way it works is almost more like a shotgun round, in that it has quite a large spread, which makes absolutely no sense. And yeah, we're completely out of that ammunition. So now we're going to use our mine thrower combined with our solid cannon to finish off the ones that we have left. Fortunately, this area isn't too long, so even if you don't have any ammo upgrades, you should be able to get through it relatively easy. I mean, even with just the 20 mines, as long as you're not silly like me and just use them to destroy random boulders, doesn't progress you anywhere, you can just flip them and then kind of like run past them. But this is like the last screen before we get out of here. Like I said, very, very short section. As I was saying before, it's very breakneck at this point. It doesn't really allow you time to breathe in any one area. In actual fact, yeah, the solid cannon with the mine thrower is arguably more effective than the anti-tank rifle by itself. So if ever you don't have much ammunition, the land mine thrower is much more important than the anti-tank rifle. So just buy that, maybe buy a few ammo upgrades for it, and as well as the solid cannon, and you are good to go. It's like a 3-minute section for an entire new enemy type, and they only make a couple of short appearances after this, like very minor areas. It could have used with a little bit of like going back through these areas. But yeah, we now have access to our rocket launcher, which we have not nearly enough points for, but that is the final weapon upgrade for Dylan. So that's pretty much all of the roster. That's all of the weapons you're going to get. It's pretty varied. You do get quite a lot of different cool toys to play with, admittedly. I just wish that the game gave you a little bit more opportunity to actually use them. There's a couple of areas coming up where Oh, and yeah, lightweight armor, so just reduces all the damage you receive by half, which just makes the last bit a lot easier because it means you're not going to be getting one banged by some of the bigger boss-like enemies you're going to come across.
Regina. Go, Regina! Head towards that control tower. I'll cover you. This must be their nest. I can't handle this by myself. Use that signal bullet. I'll blast the big one to the place you point to.
Right.
Set piece city. So this is the Allosaurus Nest, which is, I think, quite an interesting little section to it. So when you're in this area, you have this signal bullet, which, because apparently your AI partner is retarded unless you're physically controlling them. So when you fire your secondary, it will now like bring down a piece of artillery to hit whatever it's standing in front of, which fortunately can't do any kind of friendly fire, so you don't have to worry about blowing yourself up. But it does pretty chunky bits of damage. Not only is it useful for killing the Allosauruses, but you also actually need it to like break through these containers. What I would suggest actually is not really fighting anything unless you have to. Like, get a strong weapon so you can stun lock them, but there's not really any point in trying to kill them. As you saw from the first one, you only gain 1,000 points as opposed to the usual 5,000 for killing these ones.
Nice backup. Your turn.
Okay, you better have good aim.
In addition to not giving as many points, you'll notice that all of them are permanently in the enraged state. I believe the idea is supposed to be that this is like their nest, and as such they're like fiercely territorial, which also makes it a hell of a lot more difficult than just regularly fighting the Allosaurus. As such, I'd kind of just recommend picking whatever weapon is useful for just stun locking them and then just trying to make your way through here. You can use the line gun to like take them out, or at the very least if you use it and then run off, because there's a few second delay before it lands, it gives you an opportunity to like take out or at least damage something that's like behind you. So you can kind of use it, and then because it will land a few seconds afterwards, use it to cover your retreat. Both Dylan and Regina, I would use the flamethrower. I'm not entirely certain how they're able to swap between that during mid-fight, but they are. Just roll with it. So Dylan has to make the whole run through at once, and then Regina kind of breaks into these two little segments.
That was close. Your turn now.
If nothing else, all the segment shows is just how much better all of Regina's weapons are than Dylan's. I mean, the heavy machine gun in particular is just probably my favourite, and like you can fire so many of them on the move, whereas Dylan doesn't have that advantage because they're such big ones. I mean, you can fire the solid cannon on the move, but it's such a short-range, weird weapon. I don't know. It just makes you more disappointed that Dylan's the protagonist and not Regina, because Regina's arsenal is just way cooler than Dylan's is.
Good job. Let's go.
I'm not gonna need this anymore.
Triceratops. Meaning three-horned face, length 8.5 meters, height 3 meters. They are herbivores, and they can be found in the outskirts of the city in the fields. They protect the herd's eggs in herds. They are social dinosaurs. They are very gentle in nature, and they will not become vicious unless forced to, such as stepping on their eggs. A half a year ago, their attack on the city was unstoppable. a section of the city was completely destroyed. They seemed to remember who harmed them. Ever since then, some of our soldiers had to pay their lives for it. If you dare fight them, you have already lost the fight. An angry Triceratops is unstoppable. The only thing that will stop it is an even more angry Triceratops. All we can do against them is to use heavy firearms and aim for their nose and get as far away as possible. Since they have priority for their social lives, they will not come after you if you leave their territory. All you can do is run.
Regina, look. Over here. It's horrible. Who would have done this?
Dylan! Over here!
So contrary to what the Dino file says, you absolutely can kill the Triceratops, although you only fight 2 of them, and only during this specific section. So it's a little bit similar to when we had the on-rail section with the boat, except the gun can't move up and down, it only moves left to right, which kind of makes sense because you're only fighting ground-based enemies. And I fired quite a bit at the beginning, and then I quickly realized, because this was actually one of the easier fights, so I didn't have to do like any training. This was like a first time one. Not to flex, it's just a really easy section. What you do is just wait for him till he's about to hit you, and then blast him. And the reason for that is quite similar to when we were fighting the underwater Plesiosaurus, that the missile we fire actually has a little bit of a travel time, and the Triceratops are kind of... they move in a very unnatural way when they go to their attacks. Like they're running along, and then they're suddenly just straight next to you. And as such, when they make that beeline, it's very easy if you're just spamming the fire button to shoot it, and it's like whiz past them, just with them, and then you've been, gored by a Triceratops. So just wait for them to come near you and just blast them. And the gun reloads quick enough that you can do this without any real problems. But there is a pretty hefty reload animation, so if you are just firing randomly, you're liable to get gored. And then that's basically all there is to the fight. Just look around from. There is this little section where he kind of goes to the right, and you want to keep an eye on 2 of them. But yeah, once the first one's dead, the second one will just basically just freak out and go berserk, and you just keep shooting him till he's down, and a hefty 3,000 points per kill.
All right.
Phew. Too close for comfort.
Yeah, that was some cool driving. Hey, Regina, in front! Watch out! Let's go.
Right.
These people were the only ones left. There aren't any survivors now.
So we failed. How could we let everyone die?
Look, we still have the mission to retrieve the data on third energy research.
Dude, even if we get the data, how do we get back to our time? The activator for the gate has been destroyed, right?
That's why we need that data. If we study it, we might be able to build another gate to go back.
Fine. Let's split up and search the town for the data.
David? Let's go.
Okay.
So yeah, the game takes rather a grim tone at this point. All the people we came to save are dead. And I really like the music as well as like the environmental storytelling as you go through Edward City, because it's basically just a graveyard at this point. It's a sudden shift in tone. Oviraptor, meaning egg robber. Length 2.5 meters, height 1.3 meters. Ever since coming to this world, we've encountered many different dinosaurs, but this is the first one we thought we could handle easily. But we soon learned that we were sadly mistaken. They are equipped with two arsenals. One is their sharp beak, and the other is their poison. The name Egg Robber was originally given based on misconception, but it turns out that they use their beaks to crack the hard shells of eggs, and to protect themselves they have acidic poison. They are well equipped in both offense and defense. You shouldn't stop moving when you fight them. Some will spit poison, some will jump kick you. You'll have a better chance surviving if you continue to move around and attack. Their small size makes them a pain. They scamper and attack in groups. They really gets on your nerves. To counter them, a weapon which you can blaze away, it should do the job. Shop owner's papers. I underestimated the idea of trying to protect the human territory. The plan to clean out the dinosaurs intruding into the city failed. The humans in this world are about to be extinct. We humans should never have laid our hands on third energy. The military folks still don't get it, even after all this time. Their plan is to fire the third energy missile in this area of the jungle and wipe the whole area out. They plan to take the third energy data disk to the missile silo in the jungle and input the data in the warhead. The missile is scheduled to strike this area at noon tomorrow. It's either the missile first or us first. Who knows? Man, I swear the translations for the files are getting worse and worse as the game progresses. I mean, the files seem like they were kind of written by a 12-year-old to begin with, and then you add in all of the just grammatical errors that seem to go along as you get deeper in. I don't know, I find it really strange. I know they didn't have Grammarly back in the day, but just I don't know, it just seems kind of weird because you don't expect that so much nowadays. Although saying that, I do remember playing for Resident Evil 3, the remake that came out quite recently, and some of the files, just the way they were worded is just, I don't know if they were trying to harken back to how things were written back in the day, but it just seemed so out of place and bizarre. I don't know, maybe it's a Capcom thing.
Oh man, this is just what I don't need. Okay, I got a big surprise for you.
So this is the tank set piece, with one of the smallest and most anemic looking tanks you're ever going to come across, but I suppose that's the only way it can be fired and driven by one person at the same time. So this section is actually quite difficult without taking damage. You have your main cannon, and you also have these kind of like stun grenades that will automatically home in on the T-Rex. So what you want to do at the beginning part is to just run, basically. You're going to keep the cannon facing forward, and every time the T-Rex is about to get close to you, hit him with a stun grenade just to buy yourself a little bit of time, and you're going to end up using all of the stun grenades for the beginning section, but that's absolutely fine. Don't try and like fire your main cannon at the same time, it's just going to cause you more grief. So just keep moving along and destroy all of these shipping containers as you go along, and then as you get to this last straight here, that's when you can rotate the turret around and start firing. Again, as you saw, when you hit him with the main cannon, it still might not actually stop him. He will still keep coming for you. It does like a little bit of a stun lock, but not enough to stop him from attacking you. And all you want to do is just move across until you get to this section. And then the T-Rex kind of gets stuck here, and he can't actually hurt you. He actually will tear through you quite quickly otherwise. So what we want to do is just keep in the corner here and just keep hitting him with the main cannon. And eventually, after enough shots, he will fall over and be like stunned, and that will allow you to progress on to the next area. If you don't do it here, he's just going to take chomps at you as you try to move on. Basically, I went through this many times because I wanted to see, okay, is there a way to actually do this section without getting hit? And it turns out there is, which I always thought impossible. You can get through this section with a little bit of life remaining if you just keep moving and firing normally. But especially when you play on hard difficulties, it's actually quite easy to die here. So I wanted to show you, a relatively foolproof way of doing it. So when you knock him down, because you've now changed your background screen, he gets back up again. And so what you want to do is, this is another section where he can't actually grab you. So as you can see, I'm trying to kind of like orientate the tank so that the ends aren't too close to him so you can keep hitting him. It's actually quite generous with how much space it gives you. And again, since you're at this section and he can't actually grab you, just keep your distance from him and just keep shooting until he goes down. Unfortunately, after the first time he gets knocked down, it doesn't take nearly as many shots to knock him down again. And once he's down here, just quickly move on, and pretty much the same situation. This way you can kind of keep shooting him as you're moving back. You don't need to take him out another time, and actually he will get up at this section. So once you get past here, just fucking gun for it and just make a beeline for the exit.
What happened?
My sister's necklace. This necklace belonged to my sister who passed away.
What?
This can't be possible. It looks so much like the one my sister used to wear.
What do you mean?
Well, I was a very different person before I joined the army. Just a worthless street thug. At the time, I was in a gang, and one day our rivals forced their way into my house. wasn't home, but my mom and sister were. And they were... well, they're gone. And after that, I joined the army, and have spent every day trying to make up for the past.
Come on, let's go back to the patrol ship. We have no business here now.
I found a gas mask over there. We could use it to get into the deadly poison zone in the jungle. Let's go.
So yeah, all the youths in motorbike helmets make their return. We haven't actually seen them for a hot minute. They just kept turning up for like the first hour of the game and then just disappeared for the midsection. And then they're like, oh crap, yeah, we had this. There's quite a lot of set pieces through the game, and I don't know if it's a case that they were like developed individually and then they had to kind of like string a narrative around them. I don't know. I don't know how the game design went, but we've been through a hell of a lot of set pieces for the last half hour, and this actually comes back to us just being able to use our weapons. And unfortunately, this is actually the last opportunity we get to play through as Regina. It's what I would consider one of the cooler sections, at least. So, you know, at least in actuality, the Dino Crisis Saga, this is the last time you get to play as Regina, because Dino Crisis 3 was whatever the hell that was, and Dino Stalker, which was more of a sequel to Dino Crisis 2 than actual Dino Crisis 3, was just introduced a new character and was a very, very bizarre kind of esoteric trip. But since this is the last opportunity we're going to get Regina, let's just go guns blazing and just mow everything down. So as you can imagine, there's going to be a hell of a lot of raptors and whatnot on our way to the poisonous area, and I don't know if these ones are slightly stronger. They feel a little bit stronger than the previous ones, but that could just be me assuming so, just because they're not going down in 3 hits. But at the same time, the heavy machine gun does more damage. I don't know. I have no idea. But use whatever weapon you find most comfortable with and just make your way back through the jungle, same as we did at the start. So the dual submachine guns, yeah, these brown ones, I think, are a little bit tougher than normal ones. Like that more mottled coloured one went down in 3 hits, whereas the brown one seems to be taking 5, 6, 7. I don't know. I haven't looked at the game files. I haven't confirmed it. But they're not like Blue Raptor level tough, but they seem to have up the ante a little bit, which would make sense as you're progressing further into the game. You want to make it a little bit more difficult, even if it makes absolutely no sense that you would have different breeds of Velociraptor. But sure, we'll just go with it. It's an action game. Who cares? Fuck you. Yeah, that's not just me, is it? Those brown ones are definitely taking more damage. I remember playing through it thinking that they were tougher as well. But yeah, just use whatever weapon you feel more comfortable with. My personal favourite is obviously the heavy machine gun paired with the firewall. The landmines, I've never actually used them on like raptors or oviraptors. I pretty much only ever used them on the Inostrancevia, which there are a couple more of them a little bit later on, so Regina does get an opportunity to fight them. It isn't just restricted to Dylan using them, and that was close. I probably should have used a firewall. Just slight sidestep, just, flex on them. Yeah, whatever weapon you find most comfortable with. I mean, if you were a complete masochist, you could, again, just go back to the standard handgun and blast your way through it. But since you have all these new cool weapons, why not make use of them? And there's just something satisfying. It's kind of like a power fantasy, Hot red-headed girl, but, with limited graphics, admittedly. But hot red-headed girl just, going through a jungle, like, mowing things down with a machine gun. It's like something out of Predator. It's pretty awesome. And yeah, just make your way through. I wouldn't recommend the missile launcher, again, just because it has kind of a hard time locking on, and it will sometimes you'll fire a shot and it will take a while to actually hit what you want to hit. And so if all 3 of those missiles miss your raptor, well, there goes your face. You've been flayed. You're now Ghost Rider, Skullface, Red Skull. Wouldn't recommend it. But if you'll remember, what we're aiming for is in the same area where there were all those poisonous plants, we were able to go through it by burning them with the flamethrower. And yeah, the submachine gun, I mean, it stun locks 2 of them, but it does take quite a lot of shots to take them down. But yeah, the flamethrower took out the plants, but there was a lower level if you climbed down a ladder, which we weren't able to access because, quote unquote, it's just so poisonous you need a gas mask to go through. And I'm guessing the logic behind it at that point is if you have a bunch of poisonous plants up there, the poisonous gases, quote unquote, rising. So you would need to descend through the poison to get close enough to the plant to be able to take them out of the flamethrower. I mean, it's, you know, if you actually look at the physics behind like the rates of diffusion and whatnot that are going on, doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But again, it's just, you know, Capcom. You know, with this being like the final section that you can really just take Regina for, god, that sounds wrong, take Regina for a ride and test out all the weapons. One thing I kind of wish they would have done is actually mixing the different dinosaur types a bit more. So when you make your way through to the missile silo, you will have to fight raptors, you have to fight Oviraptors, there will even be some Inostrancevia, I'll probably butcher the name of that one a little bit later. But one thing I noticed re-watching this walkthrough is at no point in the entire game do you ever have to fight more than one type of dinosaur in one area. So you know, for instance, you might fight some raptors here and then you move to the next area and there's Oviraptors, that's fine. But you will never be attacked by raptors and Oviraptors at the same time. The only kind of exception to that rule is when you're on the boat segment, when you're first traveling to get to where the Plesiosaurus Nest area is. During that section you do fight Plesiosauruses and the Pteranodons, the flying ones. That is the only exception to it, and it's kind of bizarre looking back. Like, you'd think that you could get Pteranodons attacking you while you're fighting raptors, and especially if you want to like escalate the difficulty, you know, just throw a bunch of dinosaurs that are all trying to attack you at the same time. Like, let's face it, we're not exactly going for realism with this game. So when you're like asking, hey, why on earth are all these dinosaurs helping each other to kill this human, wouldn't they just infight? I mean, we kind of gave up trying to be authentic a long time ago, didn't we? Let's not beat around the bush. And it would have been a nice way to kind of, you know, escalate the challenge a little bit. And I'm not entirely certain why they didn't do that. The only thing I can think of is perhaps there was something with like the way the AI of these different creatures are working. And also, just notice, only firing 2 guns there, but managed to unlock 3 of them. Interesting. But yeah, I don't know if maybe like it would conflict with each other. Maybe they would like hurt each other, or maybe it was like an issue with the programming of the game. I'm not too certain, because I tried to remember back to Dino Crisis 1, and I think that did a similar thing, and I'm thinking I'm relatively certain even back to like Resident Evil that's usually the case. I could be wrong on that, and especially with, you know, some of the later games, there's definitely the capacity for it to happen. But I remember Nemesis being quite interesting because he would actually chase you, and so you would see him like kill other zombies that got in the way by like shooting them with rocket launcher or something. And I don't know if that was just, again, the limitation of the engines at the time, or exactly what caused that. I mean, we've already seen the blue raptors can only spawn in specific locations, so, you know, there must be some kind of specific markers setting that up. I know, it's just an interesting tidbit. It would have been, you know, cool to see them having to fight different enemies, because they have different attacks, you know, different animations, and it would force you to think a little bit more. It would definitely up the ante. I can only imagine, again, it's, you know, limitation as opposed to the game designers not wanting to do it. Even in the arena style minigame you unlock from doing the main quest, you have to face waves of different dinosaurs. You know, you start with like Oviraptors, then Raptors, Allosauruses, etc., etc. But even in that situation, you will never get two different enemies attacking you at the same time. So you have to take out all the Oviraptors, and then there'll be like a brief window where it kind of like loads onto the next part, and then it spawns the next load of enemies in. And so again, I can only imagine, because especially if you were worried about authenticity, which I don't think they were that worried about it, but if for instance you were worried about authenticity during just like a Colosseum thing, which is obviously set up in like this weird hyper matrix style VR place, that would be the perfect time for it. So maybe it was an issue that the way they interacted didn't seem to work. Maybe they would infight. Maybe it was a case that you have the Oviraptors doing their crazy flying drop kick attack and they're just killing raptors left, right and center, and it all just seemed fucky. I don't know. Interesting enough, and I know there's been a lot wrong with the Dino files we've read so far. A lot of facts that are just straight up incorrect. But when it mentions the Oviraptors using poison, they don't. So poison and venom are both harmful toxins and substances that when they get in the body, they're bad. But what differentiates them is the delivery system. So if you have to eat something, that's poison. That's why you call that a poison dart frog, because it has poison on its skin. The idea is that it deters predators, so if they do eat it, it's going to die. It doesn't eat more frogs. But if it's delivered, like again for like a snake bite, or if it's like shot out at you, like as we mentioned before, like the venom shooting out of hollow teeth, then it's a venom, not poison. But you know, that is the very least of the problems with all the Dino files in this game. Giganotosaurus, giant lizard, over 20 meters in length and over 7 meters in height. There exists a dinosaur much larger than the T-Rex. Such a rumor spread among the soldiers. The search for it began 3 years ago. There have been no sightings. However, last summer, deep in the jungle, a dead body of a T-Rex was found with huge teeth marks on its throat. The rumor was not going to end as just a rumor, not for a while. There is nothing known about their attacking behaviors. This can mean one of two things. One is that no such dinosaur exists, or two, that every soldier who did encounter it has disappeared without a trace. Soldiers who stray away from the troop, approximately 70% of their bodies have not been found. Judging from this, we cannot ignore the fact that there may be a gigantic dinosaur who has swallowed our men whole. Anyone who has seen this giant never lives to tell about it.
You again? Persistent thing, aren't you? Dylan, you scared me. I finally found the third energy data disk.
Great. Now we can get out of here. I brought the patrol ship around behind the building. Come on, let's go. What? It's our Cyclops friend again.
It can't be. That T-Rex is already...
Attack on missile launcher confirmed. Activating emergency interception mode. Missile will launch in 10 minutes. Evacuate immediately.
The computer's malfunctioned.
This is not good. Where's the control panel for the missile?
It's inside the warhead. I'll go in and shut off the controller. You go ahead and evacuate.
Okay. You be careful.
So this is the first of 2 fights we're going to have with Giganotosaurus, who, like the Kool-Aid Man, has smashed through the wall, taken out the T-Rex, our old one-eyed friend, gone oh yeah, and escalated the situation to a larger dinosaur. So the game gives both Regina and Dylan an opportunity to have their hero moments, both of them fighting this giant dinosaur, because I'm sure, you know, even back then, they knew fans were going to be annoyed if Regina didn't get a shot to show Giganotosaurus who's boss. And this first fight, in all honesty, is more of a puzzle fight than an actual fight. You can use some heavier weapons just to, you know, keep him at bay if he gets close. But the best thing to do is if you just keep moving between these 2 faucets, which they seem to be firing out some kind of fuel since it's catching fire. Maybe they were originally used to, like, you know, put fuel into the missile or something. I'm not entirely certain. But rather than using any heavy weapons, a better way of doing it is just to keep running back and forth, and as it goes to try and do an attack on you, if you stand right at the back of, like, the railway, especially in the corners like this section here, then he's not able to hit you. He or she, I don't know if this particular Giganotosaurus is male or female, it doesn't come up. They don't refer to it as one or the other, it's just a giant dinosaur. And yeah, if you run back, move to the edge so it misses its attack, then turn on the faucet and set it on fire. So yeah, as counterintuitive as it might seem, it's actually easier to beat this guy using just the handgun and the stun gun. If you use any kind of like two-handed weapons, for instance, then you have to switch it out to be able to put the stun gun on to set fire to like the petrol faucet or whatever it's meant to be. I haven't actually tried it. I would assume that you can set fire to it if you just use the firewall or the flamethrower, but I honestly never tried it because not only do you need the stun gun to activate that and it's free, but you also need the stun gun for this puzzle, which is very similar to the one that we faced when we was in the underwater section, except a little bit finicky. A lot more difficult, and now we have our time limit to it. Although saying that, I always found this puzzle was more of like an anxiety producer. I don't think I've ever failed to actually activate it, even when I was a kid and I was really bad at games, and even after failing to hit. Yeah, some of the hitboxes are a bit finicky on it, but it's relatively generous with how long the beeping will go on. I've seen a friend play this game and play this section, and I've seen them mess it up, but I personally haven't, and I don't think it's too difficult. It's quite generous with the amount of time it gives you. Like 10 minutes is so much time. But just keep hitting those and you'll be able to have access to the missile warhead. And yeah, Giganotosaurus is down for the count, giving us a nice 30,000 points for our troubles. And I suppose we can address the controversy now that no, Giganotosaurus was in actual fact not larger than the T-Rex. I think the largest T-Rex was around 40 to 42 feet in length, and the largest Giganotosaurus was about 39 feet. So they're about the same size, Giganotosaurus being ever so slightly smaller. It's not like this giant bully like you see in the game. They can just lift it up because it's like double the size of it. But, you know, I don't know if it's a case of it being that, you know, in canon lore that it's somehow been mutated by third energy, or if they just wanted a big dinosaur and they said, Giganotosaurus. That sounds cool. We'll just fudge some of the stats behind it a little bit and give us our final enemy. I have to admit, in all honesty, I kind of wish they'd just stuck with the one-eyed T-Rex since he's with you for the whole duration. I think it would have been more thematic, but I guess, you know, sequel, they got to make everything bigger.
Attention, missile destroyed. Warning, warhead armed. Evacuate immediately.
So fortunately for us, the warhead of the missile itself hasn't detonated. All of the explosion and the fire is just from more like the fuel line for the missile. Otherwise, if the warhead had detonated, we wouldn't exist. We would have been vaporized. We would just be a memory. Regina, just a memory of those who knew her. But this final section, what I like to do, and I definitely did buy too much ammunition, but you know, we have enough points for it. I like to upgrade the ammunition for the missile launcher because as you move forward, there's several Inostrancevia, which I'm fairly certain I pronounce that name differently every single time. If I was professional, I would have actually looked at how to pronounce it on a video or something and then done that. But I'm not professional, and so you've just had about 7 different butchered pronunciations of it. But basically, the 4-legged, heavily armored creature. And the missile launcher is very good at taking them out. I don't like using the missile launcher for raptors and oviraptors just because it can be a little bit slow to use. You can't move while you're aiming it, you have to stand still, so it makes you vulnerable. But these creatures are quite slow moving and also very heavily armored, which makes the missile launcher absolutely perfect for taking them out. And it's so easy to get our combos up now. I didn't actually mention it when we picked it up, but we've picked both a silver and gold card up now, which means our little combo meter just, you have to go on like vacation, you have to go make a cup of tea before the combo runs out. So it's very easy to get the extra points. Not that we really need it. The only thing left to purchase is the rocket launcher for Dylan, which is going to cost us 100k. It is possible to do the game without the rocket launcher, but the second fight you have with Giganotosaurus is a lot more difficult if you don't have it. So if you haven't managed to work up those points, I would recommend doing a little bit of grinding here just to get it. And it, in all honesty, it shouldn't take that much to grab it. But yeah, it's just a really cool weapon to use, and this is the only opportunity you get with Regina to actually fight them. So I like to make liberal use and just actually use it more than once. We spent what, like 72,000 on this weapon, and we used it for literally one room up until this point. So you know, you want to get your money's worth. Actually show off your big tools, even if that means like, you know, backtracking a little bit. Let's just take the last one out. Get it. Fuck you.
Are you okay, Regina? Get on, quick.
Oh, give me a break, man! We're dead!
We have to get as far away from this place as possible. Let's head down the river.
Great, the Watergate's closed. We can't go any further.
Wait, there's a valve. Maybe we can open the gate manually.
Whoa! Let the men handle this. Let's go, bro.
Fine. You boys, play nice now.
Okay, up there.
Right.
Well, here goes.
Oh man, how useful would it be if we had two people to defend David while he does this? Or better yet, how useful would it be if we cleared out the raptors before we started opening the Watergate? So yeah, we have one more shooting gallery-like section where we're using, I'm guessing it's some kind of like, the way it sounds either like a powerful rifle or like a harpoon gun or something. I'm not entirely certain. And it's pretty much just a case of just shoot the raptors before they get to David. There isn't really too much to do it. A lot of times one shot will knock them over and then a second or third one will knock them off the ledge. And quite annoyingly, they hit, like the hit scan for this is generous to the point of it being a detriment. Like a couple of times you might have seen, I'm trying to shoot like a raptor on like the upper pathway, but because the hit scans are so generous, it's like hitting one below it that's already on the floor, even though by no logic is my crosshairs over it. The easiest thing to do is just, well, try and group them up. If they do get close to David, you can kind of hit all three of them without having to move too much, and it's pretty simple, only a minute.
I rule! Bingo! Dylan, let's go back.
Watch out!
I'll save you, bro!
You?
Home?
What did you say?
Home.
I don't understand. You want me to come with you?
So this is hands down the most frustrating part of this game because it's an escort mission, and escort missions are so rarely done right. I was about to say they've never done right. A couple of points in Resident Evil 4 they're actually fine, so I can't say they're never done right, but in older games, especially when the AI isn't fantastic, a little bit frustrating. Fortunately, I don't think it's really proper AI with this girl, which we still haven't been given her name, I don't believe. It's not proper AI, she kind of just follows a path, and then when dinosaurs appear, she just freezes up, which does beg the question of, how she's managed to survive this long without being taken out, since she has been running around without a helmet and without a gun for a pretty significant chunk of time. The one saving grace to this is that you can't actually hurt her. There's no like friendly fire, you can't accidentally shoot her. And this is something that I've liked to exploit. Well, I guess it is kind of exploiting, but like, it's part of the game, isn't it? To make this a little bit more manageable. So during this section, most of the dinosaurs will make a beeline for the girl. They're not massively interested in you. And fortunately, because you can't hurt her, what you want to do is almost create like a force field around her, like a protective zone. Because it's very easy when dinosaurs are coming from different angles to let one slip through. And especially on the hard difficulty, she doesn't take a huge amount of punishment before she goes down. And you don't want to have to redo it if you can help it. So the best weapons for this I would highly recommend are the flamethrower and the solid cannon. And then rather than trying to kill the dinosaurs, shoot the dinosaurs, you basically shoot her instead. Because you can't hurt her, what it does is both the solid cannon and the flamethrower have like a relatively large AoE. So provided that you're constantly hitting her, it means that any dinosaur that tries to jump on her will instead get hit by either the electricity or the flame, and as such get taken out. You do, and yeah, as you can see, it's like there, they come from two separate angles. So usually if you try to take them out, say if you're using the shotgun or something, you're going to shoot one, but you're very unlikely going to be in the right position to be able to hit both of them with the same shot. So I find this to be hands down the best way to do it, which seems a bit strange and gimmicky, but also it's just not a particularly fun section otherwise. Now, unfortunately, she's more athletic than us, so she just climbs straight up this barricade here, well not barricade, like little wall here, whereas we have to actually take the ladder to go up, which puts us away from her. So if she takes 1 or 2 hits, not a big issue, but the best way to try and avoid her just taking any damage is just to when you go to the ladder, get the shotgun out so you can actually cover her. And again, if you just want to whack the firewall directly on front of her, that is a good way to protect her as well. Just make certain, because obviously when you take a step back and it creates like a line in front of you, it's very easy if you're not point angled right to just put the fire next to her, and then a dinosaur can still run through and take her out. And it's only the Oviraptors you have to deal with when protecting her, so at least it just keeps it nice and simple. But arguably the Oviraptors are the worst kind of dinosaur you could possibly have to face whilst trying to protect someone, because they are so fast and nimble. Mercifully, however, you only have to protect her for 2 screens and then she'll run off ahead, and then she's fine. This section here, we have to activate these 4 nodes, and this one's quite satisfying because we're just going to equip the anti-tank rifle and just absolutely nuke these raptors. Oh, see, this at this stage of the game, and I think I've said it like 3 times, but who fucking cares? Just if they had just added more sections where you just get to have fun with the weapons that you've got up until this point, like, it's just, oh my, like, you've earned it after everything you've gone through to just absolutely obliterate raptors by using an anti-materia rifle to nuke them. Like, you've gone through so much, just let's have a little bit of fun at the end. And as you can see, it's so satisfying to do, but you do have to be a little bit careful with it. The anti-materia rifle has this massive knockback, and if 2 of them are attacking you at the same time, you might not be able to recover from the first shot in time to be able to take the second one out. So for instance here, I make sure that I run forward a little bit so that the auto aim aims on the one close, like not the closest, the one that's on the same plane as me, the one that's most likely going to hurt me, because otherwise it would aim to whichever raptor is closest. And in that particular instance, it was actually the one down below the ladder. Even though that one's not an immediate threat, it would have to jump up to attack you. The game doesn't seem to make that distinction, it's whatever's closest. So if you are in situations like that, just make sure you maneuver your character in the right way before you start firing. And if you are struggling with the, like here, even though I took down the one below the ladder, it decided to aim to the one to the left of him instead of the one that was imminently going to jump on me. And also, whenever you use the flame wall, although certainly effective, when they're being stun locked by the fire, you can't actually shoot them. They're just being stun locked and the game doesn't seem to register another attack. And in addition to that, as you just noticed there's a brief window once the firewall stops where you can't actually hit them. So I fired around during that window and instead he just didn't take any damage. So you have to be a little bit careful. Again, arguably, the anti-tank rifle is probably not the best weapon to be using for this section, but I kind of just wanted to show it off because there's just something... There's efficiency, and then there's the satisfaction, like, factor. And just, it's the same as if anyone's ever played Fallout New Vegas. You get an anti-material rifle in that, and it's a really good gun. And the satisfaction, whether or not using VATS or whether or not you're manually aiming it, of just nuking something from a distance, just the one shot, one kill. I mean, our combo, we got 28 at the moment. I think that's the highest we managed to pull off this entire game, including the boating sections, and then we lost it. So the firewall is very good for protecting you, so you don't take damage. Not the best tool if you are trying to get the combo high, but you don't need to realistically get it any higher than 20, other than for just memeing, bragging rights. And we'll just give him a little parting gift before we make our way to home. Superintendent's will. I knew it would all come to this. There's no way humans and dinosaurs could ever coexist. But if we sacrifice our lives now, we would leave a chance for the existence of the human race. The irony is that this whole facility which we are trapped in was built to sustain a suitable environment for the dinosaurs. I am the superintendent of the facility, and I'm the only one left. I don't belong here. There is no future for this world. The children hurt by the dinosaurs have been put inside life support chambers. I trust that the people of the past will take care of them. The life support chambers are almighty. Should be able to heal any wound, no matter how critical they may be. Also, the life support chambers will feed knowledge and teach them about this world. However, the chambers were originally designed for the growth of dinosaurs. Thus, the knowledge fed will be limited to the knowledge of coexisting with the dinosaurs. The tragedy is that the children will eventually lose their speaking ability, but instead they will have been imputed the instincts to protect the dinosaurs. Today I've recorded my message for the man who will definitely come here. With this, I have nothing to regret. Noah's Ark plan. Year 2009. It all began in Bosnia, a small republic in the Southern Sea. The first overdrive was the beginning of everything. During transportation, something went wrong, and it resulted in a crack in space-time which skewed history after the Cretaceous era. To investigate the skewed biological history after the Cretaceous, an extensive experiment was conducted in a global scale. The result? Devastating. The space-time skew would take its effect on all living organisms. The Earth's history would change dramatically, and the change would wipe out the human race from ever existing. That was the conclusion of the experiment. The plan was to transport the living organisms of the Cretaceous through the time gate to a world with similar environments, far into the future. After the crisis had passed, the organisms would then be returned to their original time. We called this the Noah's Ark plan. This was the only plan that would leave any chance for the existence of the human race. We hope that this plan is successful, and we shall declare execution of this plan. WAPP Central Council. So there's a lot of different time loop type concepts coming out towards the end of this. Before we move forward, just make sure you pick up the rocket launcher if you can afford it, and any points you have left over, spend them on either upgrading the rocket launcher ammo capacity or any health you might need, because it's going to be the last opportunity to do so. Also make sure you save it.
Welcome, Lieutenant Morton.
A hologram? Well, how does he know my name?
There's not much time left, so I'll explain it short and simple. On August 10th, 2055, our Noah's Ark plan became successful.
Year 2055? What's he talking about?
To save the dinosaurs, we transferred the dinosaurs to this time, 3 million years ahead of our time.
What? 3 million years? Then you're from...
But there was another accident when we were about to go back. The gate disappeared and we were stranded in this time.
Then this is the future.
There was no way for us to survive in this world, where dinosaurs now rule. We, the remaining survivors, hurried to recover the gate. But it's too late now. My wife, Julia, was killed by the dinosaurs, and my loving child, she was hurt. Badly. Paula. Paula.
Paula? Is that your name?
Papa.
My only mission now is to protect my group. I have kept Paula and the other children safe by putting them inside life support chambers. Take the children back to your time. And now, I should introduce myself. I am former Special Forces Trad member, Colonel Dylan Morton.
What? You're myself in the future?
Time left. There's a gate behind the door. You can use it to return to your time. The gate is not complete yet. You'll be able to use it only once. Please, say hello to Regina for me. I'm counting on you, Lieutenant.
So yeah, the storyline gets all 12 monkeys at this point, and I'm never certain if the implication is meant to be that Dylan is destined to stay in the future and become old Dylan, or if old Dylan is leaving this to try and change events that happened that created that. It gets a little bit fuzzy, and even after this time, I'm not entirely certain what the end game's meant to be.
The self-destruct system has been manually activated. Detonation in 5 minutes.
What?
So this is our second and final encounter with Giganotosaurus, and you'll find that he is a lot more aggressive this time. What I would recommend doing is equipping the solid cannon, because as you try to run across this, you want to stun him as he comes in there. If you don't, he knocks the bridge off and it's an instant kill. So use the solid cannon to get across the bridge, and then from this point onwards, use the rocket launcher and basically just whack him every time he gets close. He is incredibly aggressive for this final section, and so pretty much every time you make a few steps and he looks like he's getting too close, you want to hit him with one rocket. Try not to just keep firing rockets at him. If you do so, then he ends up just kind of brushing off eventually and hitting you regardless. So you want to hit, move, hit, move, hit, move. Otherwise you'll never be able to actually progress forward. And it is very much quite a slow process. What we need to do is activate 2 different control panels to activate like a satellite laser that comes in. And fortunately, once you get past the first bridge section, there isn't another bridge section that he can knock off. But you just need to be almost just don't rush it. If you start trying to make too much progress, or if you start shooting him too much, that's when he's going to take you out. So it's very much a game of having patience and having discipline not to overdo it. In some ways, and I hate to make the comparison because it always happens, but think of it like a Dark Souls game. When you get an opportunity to hit the boss, you don't want to go in and just start mashing the attack button. You jump in, hit it a couple times, move out, and that's the way to take this guy out. So the second section is activated, so we're just going to make our way through. And again, I know I'm making this quite easy to do, but that's because I practiced for hours, and I'm not joking. Getting this fight right took hours. It only lasts 3 minutes, and it took me so goddamn long just to even be able to get past the point where Giganotosaurus smashes down and kills you instantly, because I swear he never did that when I played on easy difficulties around my granddad's. And I'm not sure if it's a hard thing, but you need to counter him, otherwise you're dead before the fight even starts. But once you make your way back round, activate the laser and enjoy finally seeing this T-Rex murderer go down. So because technically it was the satellite laser that took him out, not you, you don't actually get any points for Giganotosaurus finally biting the dust. You get 1200 for shooting him with a rocket launcher, and you get 1800 if you do a counter-attack on him, but you get 0 for actually killing him, which I always thought was quite amusing.
It's okay. Regina!
Are you alright?
Yeah, we don't have much time left. Let's use this gate and get out of here. Whoa! Paula!
don't go now, we'll never get back.
Regina, the gate is open. I know you don't want to, but you have to go back by yourself. I won't leave Paula.
Are you crazy?
Just go, please. You have the third energy data, right? When you get back to our original time, use the data to learn about third energy. Then build a perfect gate and come pick us up for the last time.
Dylan. I will. I promise.
Final warning. 10 seconds to detonation.
Don't forget, you still owe me one.
Well then, you better get back quick.
And that is the end of Dino Crisis 2. So if you've managed to watch this far, thank you so much for watching all of it. Unfortunately, that's actually the last time we ever see Regina, unless Dino Crisis manages to get a remake, and I hope one day it has something. Dino Crisis 3 doesn't really have a huge amount to do from what I remember. I must admit, I've never completed number 3 because it was kind of terrible. Maybe one day I'll get around to it. And the truer form of sequel you get for Dino Crisis is actually Dino Stalker, which isn't the best game, but if you are interested in the storyline, then that's a more sequel than Dino Crisis 3. And so just because I know it's very esoteric and that was kind of a cliffhanger ending, I will spoil it. Dylan and Paula do actually survive. So, you know, they managed to survive the explosion. It's not really explained too well how, but they do. So it all gets a weird bit... the storyline is very back-ended in this game. There isn't a huge amount all the way and then just kind of whams you at the end. So the strange biker people were actually people from the future, and you're actually from the future, not the past, if I'm understanding correctly. Although, you know, we thought we were sent back to the Cretaceous period, we're actually 3 million years in the future. I mean, how on earth you get that messed up? I don't know. And the biker people, the reason that they were so weird is because they've been kept in these chambers to protect dinosaurs, not humans, to live alongside them, which is why they've been so hostile to the other humans that end up getting trapped there, and why they also can't speak. They're more about cohabiting with the dinosaurs, because apparently them learning that way is the only way that humans and dinosaurs could coexist. And Paula, although I always remember her being Dylan's sister, is actually Dylan's daughter from him in the future. But again, I'm not certain if the future Dylan you come across is explaining all of this to you because he's trying to prevent it from getting that way, or if it's just, this is what's going to happen and I need to say this because you need to do these things for events to transpire. I'm not entirely certain. With him telling Regina to build a gate to come and pick them up, one would hint that he's trying to stop events getting to that point. But again, when you start to deal with time travel, all gets a bit strange and convoluted, which is just really weird that it's just, there's a lot of interesting ideas right at the end from what has been, let's face it, mostly a dumb action game up until that point. And it's a shame it doesn't get a sequel to flesh it out a little bit more, you know, especially as games went on from the 90s into the 2000s. You could have more in-depth storylines, but for what it is, I think Dino Crisis 2 is still fun. I think it holds up better than the first one, and if you do have an emulator, then I would recommend going and play it. There's a fun little arena mode, which I'll put the link to the description in. You get the platinum card, unlimited weapons, nice at the end of Capcom games. But yeah, thank you very much for watching. Bye bye.